Chapter 504. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Roman was shocked. Hey. What the hell is going on here? Did anything happen to Li Xiang? The attack just now actually cut off the communication between the two sides. It really gave me a fright. Roman said in a slightly panicked manner like an ordinary person. Because the Magic King sent a few holy grails to the Singularity, or maybe the Singularity was affected by the Magic King, the magic content in the Singularity has increased a lot. Although the connection between Gudatsi and Chaldea was not completely blocked, if there was any magical fluctuation, it was easy to cut off the connection. In the sudden attack just now, the connection between Gudatsi and Chaldea was cut off. It was a good example. It's okay, Doctor, Matthew protected me very well, and the enemy was also killed by assassin. After going through so much, Gudatsi's heart became optimistic, and she did not panic because of the sudden attack. Phew. It's good that nothing happened. Roman's heart was finally at ease. Although I don't want to discourage you, unfortunately, the enemy servant was not killed by me, she escaped. Wu Ming jumped on the small platform where Gudatsi and Matthew were, and his helmet touched again, revealing his dignified face. She was not killed by you, but thinking about it, the enemy is also a servant, she should have a way to save her life. Roman touched the back of his head and smiled, but unfortunately, Gudatsi and the others did not pay attention to him. Her? That means the enemy servant is a female. Gudatsi noticed Wu Ming's words. Indeed, the moment I used my noble phantasm to hit the enemy, I saw the enemy's face. It was a girl in red with fox ears and a foxtail, and the enemy was using a golden katana, so it seems that the enemy has some connection with the Japanese forces. In the territory of the Japanese forces, a black hat, fox ears, foxtail, a golden katana, and ancient clothing, all signs pointed to the fact that the enemy was a servant of the Japanese forces. A servant with Japanese attributes wearing a tsurugi hat. I'm afraid that's the only one. Roman played his role as a support member very well. Hey, Doctor, do you know who the enemy is? Matthew asked curiously. I know, after all, I can't be an effective support here, so I read a lot of books about history and mythology. He touched the back of his head as if he was embarrassed. Don't say that, Roman. You have to know that information is also very important. Wu Ming shook his head at Roman. Wu Ming knew the story of Maeve, King Arthur, and Gilgamesh, so he could participate in those places when he first came. If Wu Ming didn't know anything, he would definitely be in the dark. Gudatsi also nodded. She didn't think that the doctor had no role in Chaldea. So, Doctor, who is the enemy? After Gudatsi asked the question, Roman nodded and began to explain. The black hat is a kind of black top hat handed down from the Heian period of Japan. There are many kinds of black hats, and the standing black hat is one of them, but generally, the standing black hat is worn by men, and the most famous woman who wears the standing black hat is Suzaku Guzan. Suzaku Guzan? Wu Ming was puzzled. He really didn't know this name. There are many rumors about Suzaku Guzan's identity, such as female thief, female ghost, angel, goddess, etc. However, so far, most people agree that she is the daughter of the demon king of the fourth heaven. She is the angel who was ordered to descend to earth during the Heian period. She didn't want to turn Japan into a demonic country, so she fell in love with Sakanu Tamura when they were killing ghosts together. In the end, she was killed by her lover. Roman briefly introduced the fox-eared girl, Suzaku Guzan. But now, it seems like she is a female bandit who occupies a mountain and calls herself king. Roman smiled helplessly. According to Selander, the enemy's noble phantasm is countless golden katanas that fall like rain. That should be one of the three swords of Suzaku Guzan, the Manjushri, the Sword of Wisdom, and the Sword of Harmony. As Roman spoke, Wu Ming also recalled the other katana that was emitting a silver glow. If that's the case, the katana that is emitting a silver glow is one of the other two swords, right? Roman nodded. That silver sword should be the sister sword of the Sword of Harmony. It is the Samantabhadra Merciful Sword. However, there are also rumors that the Sword of Wisdom is the same as the Sword of Wisdom. Wu Ming thought of a guess. Since the Sword of Harmony was used to attack, the enemy must have used the Sword of Harmony for some other purpose, such as increasing the precision of control. This could also explain how the enemy could attack Wu Ming, who was at the foot of the mountain from such a distance. However, this was just a guess. In short, the enemy would not take it. However, Wu Ming had the advantage. If the enemy is an angel, she should have divinity. Roman thought for a moment and nodded. After all, every rumor is related to the angel. The probability of the enemy having divinity is very high. Then Wu Ming smiled. Since she has divinity, I have a way to deal with her. After all, Wu Ming's Dragoness space had a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks. At the beginning, because he knew the magic of heavenly locks, Wu Ming deliberately made high-quality pseudo-heavenly locks. Even if they were not used, they would not disappear. After using them, as long as they were injected with magic, these pseudo-heavenly locks would be renewed. Wu Ming prepared those pseudo-heavenly locks to deal with the followers with divinity. Since the enemy has already made a move against us, I'm afraid the road back to Riverton will not be easy, so... Wu Ming paused for a moment, which made Gudatsi, Matthew, and Roman puzzled. So let's go straight in. Wu Ming smiled at Gudatsi and the others. Ah! Screams resounded through the world. Good Lord, after going around in circles, they still ended up attacking the enemy's base. Boise. Karna saw that a mountain in the Rocky Mountains had been blown up. When he took a closer look, he saw pure white and holy magic. There was no doubt that it was Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Is it that fast? I thought it would take a few hours to start. Although Karna's tone was doubtful, he did not stop moving. He held his golden spear, gave orders to the mechanical infantry in Boise City, and ran towards the location where Wu Ming released his noble phantasm. In any case, it was agreed that Karna would support them under the command of Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Hence, Karna left immediately. On the other side, Denver City. In a dark hall, behind a curtain without any means of lighting, a figure kept pouring wine and drinking wine. How did she know that it was wine? The fox-eared girl, or rather Ling Lu Guzan, had already smelled a lot of wine when she walked to the door. It's really good wine. Ling Lu Guzan thought to herself. Although she did not drink much, as a female thief who once occupied a mountain, she said that she would drink as long as she was told that it was good wine. However, she did not dare to drink the wine that the figure in front of her was drinking. It was poisonous wine. What if she drank it to death? Ling Lu Guzan walked into the hall and said without a care. I failed, Shutendaji. Chapter 505. She didn't hesitate to call out the name of the figure behind the curtain. Her tone didn't have the slightest bit of respect. The other party was only able to make them submit temporarily because of the Holy Grail. They could still listen to normal orders, but if they encountered any orders that went against their will, they would naturally go back and fight back. Ah, I knew it would be like this. Shutendaji poured himself another bowl of wine and drank it slowly. On the other hand, Ling Lu Yuqian frowned slightly. She did not want to smell this kind of alcohol. It was like a slow-acting poison. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I was almost killed by a noble phantasm just now. If it weren't for Xiao Tonglien's support, I wouldn't be able to survive the sudden attack. With the help of the Silver Wisdom Sword, Ling Lu was able to come up with a plan to retreat. She had also planned for the enemy to launch an attack on her relic. Go ahead, but I think the other party will come to us soon. Don't lose your life, Shutendaji laughed mischievously. There's no need for you to worry. With that, Ling Lu Imperial Qian left the hall. So it's you. No wonder you're the second person who cut off my head. You're extraordinary. Shutendaji poured the wine into his bowl, but this time, he didn't drink it. But it's fate that we're able to meet again. Shutendaji poured the wine on the ground. The carpet on the ground wasn't soaked by the wine. Instead, it seemed to have blended into the air, creating a different feeling. I'm looking forward to it. On the other side, Wu Ming was close to Denver City. After killing all the ghosts and spirits, he looked at the approaching Denver City. As I expected, it's been a tough journey. Although that was what he said, Gudatsi and Matthew looked uncomfortable. I feel like if we don't cause trouble for them, they won't send ghosts to attack us. Senpai, I feel the same way. The ghosts we met along the way were all on the way to Denver City. We should return to Riverton first. Matthew and Gudatsi whispered to each other. You're too naive, Junior Matthew. It looks like the enemy is only ambushing us on the way to Denver, but in reality, if we continue to head towards Riverton, they will free up their forces to deal with us. This is an open trap. Remember that. Wu Ming said with an expression that said, you're still too inexperienced. Yes. Senior Cylinder. Matthew will remember that. As a result, Moshu replied in high spirits. Although Selander is right, why do I feel that this reason is a little far-fetched? Roman's voice came from Godatzi's wrist. Well, assassin, don't give Matthew the wrong idea. Even Godatzi felt that assassin was a little unreliable. Sigh. Matthew looked confused. In any case, we're already here. I'm afraid the enemy won't let us go back so easily. Wu-ming did not deny that his statement was wrong. Looking at the ghosts and ghosts that kept pouring out of Denver City, Wu-ming did not think that he could just leave after provoking the enemy. If only it was that easy. Besides, Karna should be here soon. Let's take down Denver in one go. At this point, whether it was Godatzi, Matthew or Roman, no one could refute Wu-ming. Phew. That's the only way. Roman sighed and said helplessly. In this situation, retreating would make it easier for the enemy to sneak up on them from behind. I have to say, you guys still underestimate the power of a top-tier servant. Wu-ming smiled faintly, attracting the attention of Godatzi and the others. A top-tier servant is similar to a champion. What's more, the spiritual base of this body is strengthened by the Holy Grail and my own body. It can be said that Matthew and I alone are enough to take down Denver City. Of course, that's only if the other party's servants are known to us. After all, as long as it was a servant, they should not be underestimated. Every servant had a noble phantasm, and the noble phantasm was the key to victory from defeat. As long as it's not an exceptional servant, then the only thing we need to pay attention to in Denver City is Shitendaji. Roman also looked serious after hearing Wu-ming's words. Selander is right, Tachika. Although your body has a slight resistance to poison, this time you are facing Shitendaji's divine wine. It's better to be safe than sorry. For ordinary people, just smelling Shitendaji's poisonous wine will kill them directly. Roman said so much to be on the safe side. Tachika and Matthew should stay here. Wu-ming said. Ha! It's too dangerous to let assassin go alone. Godatzi was obviously not at ease. After all, it was Godatzi's kindness. Wu-ming couldn't refuse again, so he smiled and promised again. Didn't I say that I'm a top-tier servant, and even if there is an emergency, I still know how to run, so don't worry. With that said, Wu-ming touched Godatzi's little head, like a brother making a promise to his sister. Just when Godatzi didn't say anything, a huge red flaming ghost hand attacked Wu-ming. Rashuman Dienji! Wu-ming's face froze, and he immediately put on his helmet, then rushed toward the huge ghost hand with the holy lance in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil! Once again, Wu-ming activated his noble phantasm, and the light lance in his hand became huge. However, Wu-ming didn't throw it away. If it exploded here, Godatzi and Matthew would still be affected. Therefore, Wu-ming directly held the huge light lance and faced the red flaming ghost hand. Rumble! Wu-ming pushed the ghost hand all the way to a distance of 100 meters away from Godatzi and threw the light lance in his hand. By the way, the huge flaming ghost hand that was blocked by the light lance was also thrown directly, and there was a huge explosion in front of Denver City. Wu-ming stretched out his hand, and the holy lance returned to Wu-ming's hand. It's you, Ibaraki Kido. Wu-ming asked. After all, there were too many hints. It was related to Shitendaji, ghosts, Japanese monsters, Rashomon, plus he had met Ibaraki Kido in Uruk before. Wu-ming also remembered her voice, so when Ibaraki Kido shouted the name of the noble phantasm, Wu-ming had already guessed it. After Wu-ming asked, a female ghost dressed in yellow clothes with 2 horns on her forehead jumped out from an unknown place. Her entire body was covered in flames and she had 2 horns on her forehead. Humph. Ibaraki Kido, will protect Shitendaji's Devil's Kingdom. Don't even think about breaking my home and Shitendaji's. Ibaraki Kido didn't seem to know Wu-ming at all. It seemed that this Ibaraki Kido had no connection with the Uruk's defector, but that was normal. How could he meet a servant with the memory of him and Wu-ming? Wu-ming was not lucky, so how could it be so easy to hit the jackpot? I didn't deal with you in Uruk with the thought of less trouble. It seems that I have a chance today. After that, without waiting for Ibaraki Kido's reply, he directly went up and communicated with the other party with the Holy Lance. Wah! You bastard, you haven't started yet. Chapter 506. Oh! Facing the white knight who sneak attacked him, thought he was, Ibaraki Dojo roared like a ghost who had been provoked. At the same time, a gust of wind blew around Ibaraki Dojo. The wind helped the fire, and the hot flame rose to the sky, rushing toward Wu Ming who was attacking Ibaraki Dojo. Puchi! Wu Ming condensed his magic power into the holy spear in his hand and swept it across, dispersing the fire of karma. Then appeared in front of Wu Ming's eyes was a bone sword full of strange aura. Clang! Using the holy spear to block the bone sword slash, it made a harsh collision sound. Wu Ming slammed hard, trying to push Ibaraki Dojo who was holding the bone sword out, but found that he couldn't push him out. Ibaraki Dojo's whole body exuded magical power, and the bone sword in his hand was also attached with demon aura. Hey hey hey! Want to fight with a ghost? You're too naive. Ibaraki Dojo seemed to have found Wu Ming's mistake, and his face kept smiling, as if he was mocking and proud. Zzz. Dash! Wu Ming held the holy spear with both hands, and Ibaraki Dojo, who was holding the bone sword with both hands, kept exerting force. The holy spear and the bone sword rubbed against each other, making a harsh sound. Wu Ming really couldn't push Ibaraki Dojo away, but Wu Ming knew that although Ibaraki Dojo was a ghost, his strength as a servant didn't surpass Wu Ming. This point was discovered by Wu Ming when they fought, so it was reasonable to say that such a situation shouldn't happen. However, the other party seemed to have used an ability similar to the release of magic to strengthen his power. Ibaraki Kido's demonic aura was the best proof of this. However, Ibaraki Dojo wasn't the only one with skills. Wu Ming also had magical power. Boom! Wu Ming frowned, and a strong magical power burst out from the back of the armor below the shoulder, like a cloak, floating behind Wu Ming, and like a comet tail, providing Wu Ming with strength. As a result, Wu Ming gradually suppressed Ibaraki Dojo. What? Ibaraki Dojo was shocked. She did know that the white knight in front of her had the strength to suppress her, but she didn't expect that she still couldn't suppress the opponent with the help of Ghost Seed Demon. Is this guy berserker? How is he stronger than a ghost? Ibaraki Dojo complained loudly in annoyance. When she saw the white knight in front of her holding a gun, she thought that her enemy was a gunman. Who would have thought that the other party was so strong? What a coincidence, I'm berserker. Wu Ming was quite impressed with Ibaraki Kiddo. In this kind of situation, he still had the ability to chat with Wu Ming. Naturally, Wu Ming couldn't let him down. Damn it! Don't underestimate me! Ibaraki Dojo roared, and then swung her right hand down. That's right, maybe because the connection of the right hand was unstable, Ibaraki Dojo had been using her left hand to hold the sword. Ibaraki Dojo used her right arm to hold the bone sword, and her entire right hand fell down. As if she could control it, Ibaraki Dojo's right hand flew around Ibaraki Dojo. Was it Ibaraki Dojo's demonic hand that was cut off? Wu Ming Dojo's eyes narrowed, and Ibaraki Dojo finally had some free time. You didn't expect it, right? Since my right hand was cut off, although I took it back, it still couldn't connect with my right arm. Instead, it became my noble phantasm. Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wu Ming Dojo in front of her proudly. Take this. Rashuman Dienji. The demonic hand that was floating around Ibaraki Dojo turned into a huge flaming demonic hand as Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm was released. Wu Ming felt a sense of danger from the demonic hand that was wrapped around the demonic hand. It was as if his noble armor was nothing and could hurt him at any time. However, even without the armor, Wu Ming Dojo wasn't weak. Therefore, he didn't do anything else and continued to suppress Ibaraki Dojo. Then, when the huge demonic hand grabbed Wu Ming shouted calmly. Karna! Ha! Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wu Ming Dojo in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Brahmastra, Brahma, cover the earth. A laser-like golden heat ray shot from afar and hit Ibaraki Dojo from below Wu Ming Dojo's arm. A dash! Ibaraki Dojo spat out a mouthful of blood from his mouth. The blood that spilled on the ground was filled with heat and started to burn. Bang dash! Wu Ming Dojo's magical power surged as he slapped Ibaraki Dojo away. Damn! Damn it, this is the breath of the sun. Ibaraki Dojo felt the scorching breath that was still in his body and spoke with difficulty. This scorching heat continued to burn Ibaraki Boy's body, making him suffer unspeakably. Just when Wuming Dojo was about to kill Ibaraki Dojo, a piece of talisman paper flew between Ibaraki Dojo and Wuming Dojo. Boom dash, the talisman paper turned into a flame that soared into the sky. However, from Wuming Dojo's point of view, it was just a flame barrier. Its purpose was naturally to buy time for Ibaraki Dojo, who was behind the flame barrier. Wuming Dojo swept out with his holy lance that contained powerful magical power, and the flame barrier was instantly broken. Where Ibaraki Dojo was originally, there was only a small pool of blood that had begun to burn. I forgot that Ibaraki Dojo had escaped from the 4 heavenly kings of Lai Guang. I'm afraid that has become a skill or a noble phantasm. Giving up chasing Ibaraki Dojo, Wuming Dojo turned around and returned. When he came to Matthew and Godatsi, Wuming Dojo saw the person he had just called out. You came quite quickly, Karna. At this moment, a white-haired man in golden armor was standing beside Godatsi and Matthew. The flame in his right eye had not subsided yet. It was Karna. I came with all my strength after seeing your noble phantasm. It was just a coincidence. Karna shook his head modestly, and the flame in his right eye swayed as he shook his head. It was quite interesting. Furthermore, it was quite clear that the Brahmastra had been launched from Karna's eyes. Karna really scared me when he came over just now. By the way, assassin, are you all right? Weren't you hurt by Karna? Godatsi looked at Wuming Dojo worriedly. At this moment, Wuming Dojo's body was smoking. The smoke was coming out from the gaps in his armor, and it looked like he was being cooked. Don't worry. Because Sodric was too close to the enemy, I didn't use a noble phantasm with a wide range of damage, Karna explained. Karna defended himself. He understood this point, and didn't use Brahmastra Kundala or anything like that. He couldn't use Sunwheel, Vaishavi Shakti, which could only be used when he stripped the golden armor. After all, the golden armor was still on Karna. The heat on my body was caused by Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm. I don't know why, but her ghost claw directly ignored my defense. I was injured, but it's not a big deal. As he spoke, Wuming took out a few bottles of healing potions from the golden ripples that he had already activated. Wuming took off his helmet, revealing his slightly red cheeks. Now, some parts of his body were already cooked. After all, it was as if he was defenseless against an anti-army noble artifact that contained the karmic primordial fire. Even Hercules would lose his life if he was here. It was all thanks to Wuming's B++ durability that he was able to survive. Then, Wuming drank the healing potion under everyone's gaze. The white smoke on his body disappeared, and his complexion returned to normal. After all, they had seen potions like this in Winterwood City, so Godatsi and Matthew didn't look surprised. Since Karna is here, let's take Denver directly. Chapter 507. Godatsi nodded. After all, they had fought for so long, and it would be unreasonable to leave now. The original team of 3, plus Karna, became a team of 4. The 4 of them headed toward Denver. Although Karna was with them, it still couldn't stop Godatsi's burning heart. Godatsi stared at Karna's eyes, which were no longer emitting sparks, and asked curiously, "Speaking of which, Karna can release a noble artifact with his eyes. It's really a divine artifact." "It's no big deal. A true hero kills with his eyes," Karna replied casually. After all, he was a man of few words. Only you can say something like that. Wuming smiled helplessly at the side, then continued. "I can't kill enemies with my eyes. I can only say that Karna is worthy of his reputation." Godatsi and Matthew were amused by Wuming's teasing. In the face of Wuming's teasing, Karna didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Although it's not very nice to interrupt you, you're about to go deep into the enemy's base. Is it really okay to look like you're going on a field trip?" At this moment, Roman's voice suddenly came from Godatsi's bracelet. This voice. Is it the magician with the magical ability? Although he couldn't see the person, Karna remembered Roman's voice. The magical ability Karna mentioned was the remote virtual screen. It seemed that many servants were interested in this kind of magic. This magician is right. We do seem to be too relaxed. Of course, Karna had always been a steady person. He was just Wuming and Godatsi. Mashu also had a dignified look on her face, so she wasn't any worse than Karna. Senpai, I think the doctor is right. We really do look a little relaxed. Matthew whispered. You're right. Ahaha. Gudatsi smiled awkwardly. However, Wuming shook his head. The fact that Tachika doesn't have any psychological pressure is the best support for us, so it's not wrong to relax a little. Even though Gudatsi basically didn't have the ability to provide support. Plus, we look very relaxed, but haven't you noticed that the ghosts that were supposed to be attacking us are all gone? After repelling Ibaraki Boy, there were no more ghosts that came to attack Wuming's group. It seems that they don't think it's going to work no matter how many ghosts they send, Karna analyzed. However, compared to them not coming down to die, I'm more inclined to believe that those ghosts have all disappeared. Why do you say that? Gudatsi questioned Wuming's words. Yes, it's time for the genius. Suddenly, a Mona Lisa appeared beside Wuming and the others. Wuming had seen Da Vinci before, but Karna hadn't. Therefore, he was quite interested in this newcomer. Karna narrowed his eyes. He could feel that this was a servant. Da Vinci's servant? Matthew said with some confusion. Yes, it's the genius, Matthew. Roman went to the toilet. Da Vinci looked at Matthew with a smile, then began to explain. Although it's strange, the detector on my side has clearly detected that something is amiss ahead. The ahead mentioned by Da Vinci was a place like a cliff in front of them. Da Vinci's servant, but there's nothing in front? Gudatsi was also very puzzled. I forgot to mention this, Matthew. We can say that we have arrived in Denver. With that, Wuming walked toward the cliff. Gudatsi and the others also followed. The place where Gudatsi was located was not a cliff, but rather a flat area at the bottom of the mountain. Of course, even so, its average altitude was still 1,600 meters above sea level. A huge fortress similar to a Japanese-style ancient city is located below. That is the city of Denver. It can be said that the city of Denver is at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. I was a little worried about what to do if there was a mudslide or something. After the improvement of the genius, Chaldea's instrument has adapted to the high magic density environment. There should have been a lot of life in front of us, but after you defeated Ibaraki Boy, all those lives disappeared. Although Chaldea's instrument is used to detect magic, the magic in this world is transformed by life, so it can also detect magic. Anyway, whether they were killed or used as sacrifices, most of the ghosts in the strange city of Denver have disappeared. That is to say, the remaining magic waves belong to the servants, right? Wuming asked. That's right. This is a battle between heroes without their servants. Anyway, only you and Karna can participate in the battle. Matthew still has to protect Tachika. So that's it. I still have to continue improving the instrument here. Good luck, Tachika. After that, Da Vinci cut off the communication. As expected of Da Vinci's kin. As always, he feels reliable. Gudatsi smiled awkwardly. Obviously, reliable was a derogatory term. Don't worry. I think she probably thinks that Karna and I are here, so Da Vinci can rest assured that we will protect you. You should know that both Karna and I are not simple people, Wuming comforted. Let me say something first. Karna raised his hand. I don't have the ability to protect others. This armor is the only thing that can protect others. However, because Sodric and I are the only combatants here, I can't easily hand over the armor to you. After all, if Karna had given his armor to Gudatsi, then he would have been much weaker than Gudatsi. After all, not only did he have to release the fatal sun wheel, but he also had to give up the golden armor to Vasvi Shakti. Without the golden armor, Karna would no longer be the invincible Karna he used to be. At that time, he would have to be like an ordinary warrior and not let himself get hurt easily. Because without the golden armor, Karna was neither invincible nor able to recover from his injuries, nor could he use the essence of the sun to heal the foreign objects in his body, so he was much weaker. You don't have to worry about that at all. Matthew is very reliable. Gudatsi said to Karna with a smile. As she spoke, she gave Matthew a thumbs up, which made Matthew's face instantly turn red. However, Matthew did not hesitate to protect Gudatsi. I won't let any senior come to any harm. Looking at Matthew's determined and powerful eyes, both Wuming and Karna smiled with relief. It's your blessing to have such a servant, master. Karna chuckled. The praise made Matthew's face turn red again, and Godotzi looked at Matthew happily. Because Matthew is my lovely junior. Godotzi hugged Matthew as she spoke. Senpai. Wait a minute. Mashu, who was being held, could only struggle weakly. In that case, I'll lead the way first. Wuming nodded to Karna, Godotzi, and Matthew, then stood at the side of the mountain. Mythical Yggdrasil. Chapter 508. Even Wuming knew that a town could not be built directly at the foot of a mountain, so Wuming did not think that others did not know about this problem. Moreover, the Denver city in front of him was completely built in Japanese style, and it was a huge city. It did not look like an ordinary city in this era. This was undoubtedly the trump card of a servant, a noble phantasm. Therefore, the way Wuming chose to open the way was definitely different from the usual way. Facing the Japanese city of mysteries, which only had a few servants left, Wuming's way of opening the way was to directly blast open the gate with his noble phantasm. With the release of his noble phantasm, Wuming was not in a hurry to throw out the holy spear. Instead, he held it with both hands and kept it hidden, constantly gathering mana and holy light. This huge amount of mana. Karna was a little shocked. This amount of mana was already comparable to all the mana of a first-class servant, and it was even slightly more than that. Moreover, at this moment, Wuming's attack was still enough to compete with Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, in terms of explosive power. The reason why they only competed in terms of explosive power was because Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, was an extremely special noble phantasm. It did not mean that it was only effective against gods, but it had an additional effect on gods. Moreover, if Karna released his noble phantasm and did not release it, he was afraid that his solar wheel Vasvi Shakti would be enough to overpower Wuming's attack. However, this was a joke. How could anyone let their enemy charge their noble phantasm? However, Wuming had been charging for so long, and no one came out to stop him. It seemed that his opponent really did let Wuming do whatever he wanted. He really did not know what his opponent was thinking. Karna was a little helpless, but he did not expect anyone to stop Wuming. He was just disappointed in his enemy. But then again, would the Japanese city be able to defend against Wuming's relic? Anyway, they would find out soon. Karna was looking forward to seeing how Wuming would complete the relic's relic. After all, if the noble phantasm was to explode here, he would be able to survive with his golden armor. However, Matthew would not be able to protect Godotzi, as he would not be able to activate his noble phantasm in time. Godotzi would definitely be blown to smithereens. Just as Karna was about to take off his golden armor and put it on Godotzi, Wuming finally moved. Wuming raised the shrunken version of the holy spear in his hand, which was white on the outside and black on the inside, in front of him. This was the effect of the holy spear being compressed to the extreme. It was so white that it was black, and it had shrunk to the extreme. The reason why he did not throw it on his shoulder like a javelin was that Wuming was not sure that he could control the holy spear that was about to explode in his hand. Therefore, Wuming put the holy spear in front of his chest as if he was holding a ceremony. Then, Wuming recited the oath. The next attack is the real legend. Accept the judgment. Because the name of the relic had already been recited, there was no need to release the real name again. Then, Wuming threw the holy spear into the sky. The holy spear, which was so white that it was almost black, penetrated the clouds. It was like some kind of attack that fell from the sky, and it flew away without a trace. Then, like a divine punishment, the sky and earth changed color. In the sky above the Japanese city of mysteries, black clouds were constantly rotating with faint thunder and lightning. The vortex in the middle began to shine like hidden thunder, which made people frown. Godotzi and Matthew looked at this scene and were both stunned. This was a lot more than the previous battle. Of course, the servants in this Japanese city of mysteries must have noticed it too. Then, Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! In an instant, white light covered the entire land. After some time, Godotzi opened her eyes. She rubbed her eyes that were uncomfortable because of the sudden strong light. Then, Godotzi began to look around. Matthew was holding a shield to protect Godotzi, while Karna was in front of Matthew, using his body as a shield. Matthew did it subconsciously. He did not know that Wuming had calculated the range of the attack, and he did not know that the damage of the relic would not affect here. However, some of the wind swept over. That was why Karna chose to stay in front of Matthew and Gudatsi when he knew that there would be no actual harm. This move is too cruel. Gudatsi held back for a long time, and that was all she could say. Karna nodded. Wu Ming's move was comparable to his God-Slayer spear. It was quite destructive. However, Wu Ming waved his hand calmly. After all, no one came out to disturb me. This is a rare opportunity. If I don't accumulate more mana, wouldn't I be sorry? That was the terrifying thing about Wu Ming's spiritual base. It did not seem to be too powerful, and it felt no different from the previous servants' bodies. However, that was not the case. The interior of this spiritual base had been carefully modified by Wu Ming, and the modification took place in the root. It could be said that if Wu Ming wanted to, he only needed to accumulate power for a day and a night, and then use the relic to self-destruct. Then, the American continent, which was the singularity, would disappear. Wu Ming completely removed the restrictions of the spiritual base in the root. In other words, as long as it was an attack that could be achieved in theory, Wu Ming could do it now. Just like the self-destruct of the American continent mentioned earlier, if there was enough mana and he could control it, Wu Ming was fully capable of destroying the singularity. Wu Ming's cheating method was not what it looked like on the surface. Of course, part of the power provided by the Holy Grail was also part of it. Although the Holy Grail had always seemed useless, it was something that the Magic King used to confuse people. How could it be so simple? After Chaldea recovered the Holy Grail, he also nervously protected it. Da Vinci also studied it very carefully. Naturally, the Holy Grail could not be underestimated. Of course, Wu Ming was here to save the singularity, not to destroy it, so he would not blow up the American continent. Gudatsi and Matthew, who had just come to their senses, smiled awkwardly after hearing Wu Ming's words. Moreover, don't underestimate this city. Although it didn't completely block it, it can still be considered to have blocked my noble artifact. Wu Ming's words stunned Gudatsi, Matthew, and Karna. Gudatsi and Matthew were surprised that the other party could actually block such a terrifying relic, while Karna was surprised that there was a city that could block a relic that was comparable to his God-Slayer spear. With this thought in mind, the three of them looked at the Japanese-style city below. The originally gorgeous and dignified city had been damaged as if it had experienced a natural disaster. The outer city towers had basically collapsed, and the various pavilions and houses inside were almost completely destroyed. The entire city could be said to be in a sorry state. Only the palace-like hall in the center was still intact, but it had lost its previous gorgeous and dignified aura and color, giving a feeling that it had lost its power. Let's go. My relic only destroyed the other party's relic. I'm afraid the servants on the other side did not suffer any damage. After Wu Ming finished speaking, Gudatsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded encouragingly. Then, let's take the Holy Grail here today. In this way, the four of them moved toward the dilapidated city. Chapter 509. Because the distance was very close, the four of them only took a few minutes to reach the gate of the city. Looking at Gudatsi, who was still trying to figure out how to contact Roman, Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Because of Wu Ming's noble phantasm, the communication device that had been repaired was destroyed again. Because Da Vinci modified the communication device to adapt to the situation of high magic concentration, Wu Ming directly used super magic explosion on her and directly cut off the communication system. It was estimated that if they wanted to contact each other again, Da Vinci would have to further modify the device, at least to adapt it to the magic concentration of Kenzaki's atmosphere. No longer paying attention to Gudatsi, Wu Ming looked at the half-destroyed door and said thoughtfully, "To be able to do this, I'm afraid the other party used the Holy Grail." Karna nodded after seeing the situation. "I'm afraid that's the case, otherwise, I really can't think of any defense that can block such a catastrophic attack." However, Wu Ming smiled slightly. He really did know of a noble phantasm that could defend against any kind of damage. King Arthur's scabbard. Avalon. As someone who was familiar with the story of King Arthur and had accompanied King Arthur for half of his life, Wu Ming naturally understood the power of Avalon. True name liberation could produce an unparalleled defensive barrier that was like a layer of scales, and even the good separation sword might not be able to break it. And Avalon could also make the wearer never get hurt, and it was in a semi-invincible state. Wu Ming knew that Avalon would be accidentally lost, but because Wu Ming thought that Artoria needed Avalon more, he had always asked Artoria to carry it with her. Anyway, Avalon was not lost until Wuming left by himself, but from the ending, Avalon was still lost. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens. Damn it! If it weren't for the fact that Wuming had played his part being a knight, how could Morgan Le Fay have been tricked by him? In a direct confrontation, Morgan Le Fay wouldn't have been able to defeat Wuming. Moreover, if Wuming's main body had appeared at that time, he would have been able to crush Morgan Le Fay with his little finger. Moreover, he wouldn't have needed any reason to do so. After all, if you provoked the Origin Dragon, would it need a reason to crush you? Of course not. The more Wuming thought about it, the angrier he got. He quickly took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. Phew, Karna looked at Wuming in confusion, but didn't say anything. Ahem. Let's go in. Wuming coughed and walked toward the door. As soon as they entered the city gate, Wuming realized that something was wrong. He immediately waved for Godatsi to stop. The air here is highly toxic. Then, he immediately covered himself with magic power. Wuming realized that not only the air, but even the ground under his feet was full of poison. Strangely, the poison didn't spread outside. It was as if the city was an inherent enchantment filled with poison. Wuming himself wasn't very afraid of poison. However, the poison this time was a little different. Therefore, Wuming didn't dare to be careless. Sizzle. Although Wuming covered himself with a magic power shield, the poison in the air had begun to corrode Wuming's outer appearance. This poison is a little too strong. Wuming increased the magic power output of his magic power shield. Then I can't go in? Godatsi was a little disappointed. Wuming looked at Godatsi awkwardly. Do you really think this is a tourist attraction? Now it's time for me to take action, Karna said. After all, Wuming had invited him to deal with the poison. Karna walked through the gate and waved his spear. The true sun fire burst out of his body and began to burn the poison. The ground was penetrated by Karna's flames and gradually turned red, as if lava was about to erupt. The air was also covered and burned by Karna's flames. It's really worky, Matthew said excitedly. However, Karna and Wuming didn't look very happy. Because both Wuming and Karna could feel that the burned area was filled with poison again. This poison seemed to be inexhaustible. Even if one area was burned, the poison in other areas would fill in. Even the poison that filled and made Karna's flames burn more vigorously. Smelling the intoxicating smell in the air, Wuming said without hesitation. This place is filled with the poison of fine wine. It's probably Shitendaji. As Karna burned, more and more wine fragrance came from the air. Cough cough. Cough cough cough. Matthew began to cough. Matthew, are you okay? Godatsi looked at Matthew worriedly. Matthew's face was purple. There was no doubt that he was poisoned. Wuming took out a bottle of potion from his golden ripple, and threw it into Godatsi's hand. It seems that Shutendaji's poison has begun to spread. Matthew is poisoned. This is the antidote. Give it to Matthew. After hearing Wuming's words, Godatsi hurriedly uncorked the potion bottle and carefully helped Matthew drink the potion. After drinking the potion, Matthew's complexion immediately improved. It had to be said that the game's products were all excellent. Detoxification was like a rule. Because of the characteristics of the antidote, Matthew was no longer poisoned. Thank you very much, Senpai Cylinder. Matthew thanked Wuming. Hearing such solemn words, Wuming seemed to see Galahad. Compared to Cylinder, I prefer you to call me by my other name. Matthew looked at Wuming in confusion. I'm kidding. Matthew, just be Matthew. The rest is just a matter of people abandoned by time. Don't worry about it. To be honest, if Matthew really copied Galahad's words, Wuming would not be very happy. After all, being himself was the most important thing. Chapter 5:10. This poison that defied common sense was able to block Wu Ming's precious artifact. They were clearly a power, yet they knew their place. This was what they were currently puzzled about. However, there was a more important point. They had to retrieve the Holy Grail and save this era. Therefore, it would be best if they could retrieve the Holy Grail without bloodshed and without any casualties on either side. However, from Lulu's previous attack and the current poison, it was clear that the other side had no intention of making peace. It could only be said that the heroic spirits were a group of super problematic characters who were bored in the heroic spirit palace. The reason why heroic spirits were called heroes or anti-heroes was that they were different from ordinary people. And these differences had long since established their identities as problematic characters. If they met someone they liked, the other party would instantly become brothers with them. However, if they didn't like the other party, they wouldn't need any fancy reasons. Just the simple reason of not liking the other party was enough to make them fight. However, it was precisely because of this casual nature that these heroes became heroic spirits. It was also because of the personalities of heroic spirits that Godotzi didn't show any fear on this journey to save humanity. After all, Godotzi held the fate of humanity in her hands. However, Godotzi wouldn't complain or be afraid because she had Matthew by her side, a companion full of personalities on the road. Cough cough. However, it was also because some heroic spirits were too individualistic that they stood on the opposite side of reason. At least, that was the case for now. Just like the female high school student in front of Wuming and Karna. Next, this road is blocked, Lulu said to Wuming and Karna kindly. Although she was also in this poisonous area, for some reason, she wasn't affected by the poison at all. As if she had guessed Wuming and Karna's thoughts, Lulu waved her hand and began to explain. Of course, Shitendaji's poison is very strong, and it doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. I am also affected here. Of course, Wuming really didn't want to know. Then, Lulu's body slightly emitted a trace of magic, and a faint golden light attached to her body. It's all thanks to the Holy Grail, Holy Grail. Wuming could more or less guess what was going on. After coming into contact with the Holy Grail, he had temporarily gained immunity to Shitendaji's poison. Okay, then I'll leave this holy maiden, who also has divinity like you, to you, Karna. After Karna nodded, Wuming changed direction and continued to walk toward the central hall. No, wait a minute. Why did you leave just like that? Ling Lu Guzan felt helpless when he saw Wuming leave without paying attention to him. Whoosh, with the sound of the wind, Lulu dodged the spear Karna, who was rushing to attack. You to me, Karna, you to attack, Lulu's is to me. Lulu's to say, Karna, Lulu to attack, to kills to hit full, you attack. Since you're an enemy, then let's fight. Karna, who had transformed into an aloof Adonis, didn't say anything else and swung his spear at Lulu again. Bang! A samurai sword emitting a golden and silver glow blocked Karna's spear. Lulu took out the Samantabhadra wisdom sword from somewhere and blocked Karna's attack. Since the Samantabhadra had already appeared, the Samantabhadra naturally appeared as well. A samurai sword emitting a golden glow floated in the sky. It was the Samantabhadra. The Samantabhadra split from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8. In just a few seconds, it had split into hundreds of Samantabhadra. Then I'm going to get serious too. Take this attack, demigod hero of India. Ling Lu's previous carelessness was replaced by a solemn expression. Tenki aim, heavenly phantom rain. In an instant, hundreds of Samantabhadra fell directly in front of Karna and Lulu, causing a violent explosion. Boom, boom, boom. In front of him, Wuming heard the explosion behind him and glanced sideways. You should have no problem dealing with Lulu, right? Good luck, Karna. With that, Wuming sped up and ran toward the central hall. When he was almost at the front of the hall, a woman in a gorgeous blue dress that resembled a witch's costume appeared in front of Wuming, half kneeling. She had the same fox ears and tail as Lulu, but the fox in front of Wuming looked a little like a wife. However, if Wuming wasn't mistaken, she had 6 tails behind her. Although the fox looked weak, it had a lot of magic power in its body. Moreover, she had a golden glow on her body. There was no doubt that she had come into contact with the Holy Grail and obtained a temporary immunity. A second fox, in addition to your rather strong magic power, based on my guess, you should be one of the 3 great demons along with Shitendaji and Daitengu, Tamamonome. However, from what I know, Tamamonome should have 9 tails, but you actually only have 6. Saying so, Wuming looks towards the fox spirit who is standing in front of the main hall. To be honest, other than Tamamonome, Wuming couldn't think of anyone else who could have a fox spirit that was on par with Lulu. Although he was curious why she was half kneeling. Yes, I've been waiting for you for a long time, Sarandar-sama. As for the number of tails, it's only because I haven't recovered my strength. Tamamonome easily admitted her identity. Tamamonome seemed to be in a good mood. The 6 tails behind her swayed, and her body emitted a trace of mana. Wu Ming frowned slightly and said, "This familiar mana. I'm afraid you're the one who saved Ibaraki Duji." Wu Ming felt this magic power. It was the same magic power that appeared on the talisman paper in front of Ibaraki Boy. "Yes, you're right, Serenda-sama," Tamamonome said with a smile. He felt that this woman was getting stranger. Wu Ming pondered. "Then if you can step aside, I think we can continue to talk like this." Although Wu Ming didn't think that she would easily step aside. After all, she was one of the 3 great monsters of Japan, the white-faced golden 9-tailed fox. Moreover, it was said that Tamamonome was actually the incarnation of the Japanese sun god, Amaterasu. Those who were related to gods were not to be trifled with. Take Ling Lu Guzan for example. Don't be fooled by her abnormal appearance. She was not someone to be trifled with. Wu Ming didn't think that she was a simple servant who could successfully ambush his group and survive after being blown up by his noble phantasm. At the very least, this Tamamonome and Lulu Guzan weren't as simple as they looked. After all, the most important point was that Wu Ming never told Tamamonome that his name was Serender. She must have learned about Wu Ming's information through some means. Wu Ming judged. Fortunately, she didn't know Wu Ming's name as the Root Dragon. Otherwise, Wu Ming would really be shocked. Then, just as Wu Ming was about to make the first move, Tamamonome spoke. Her words shocked him from another perspective. "Of course, Serenda-sama." Then, Wu Ming looked at Tamamonome with a strange and unbelievable look. "Did Shutendaji know that you betrayed him?" "You may not know, but Shutendaji has left this hall." Wu Ming was taken aback. "She left here, how rare." Wu Ming instantly thought of a possibility. "Yes, it's what you think," Tamamonome said instantly. Wu Ming didn't enter the hall. Instead, he immediately turned around and prepared to leave. However, as if he thought of something again, Wu Ming stopped and turned to look at Tamamonome. "I have a question. Why did you tell me this news?" Tamamonome seemed to have heard the question she wanted to ask, and there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. "Because I want to marry you, Wu Ming-sama." In an instant, Wu Ming's eyes widened. Chapter 5:11. Wu Ming's eyes widened, showing that his heart was not calm. After Wu Ming finished releasing his noble phantasm, the sky had become cloudless. Wu Ming's eyes sharpened as he was drenched in the sudden rain of the sun. Wu Ming suddenly appeared in front of Tamamonome. Wu Ming stretched out his hand and directly grabbed Tamamonome's white neck. However, the magical power attached to Wu Ming's hand that was holding Tamamonome's neck showed that Wu Ming was not joking. Even if she was a servant, she would not be able to survive if her neck was broken. "How did you know this name?" Wu Ming's tone had a hint of murderous intent. That's right, Wu Ming was not surprised that she wanted to marry him. Although he was a little bit concerned about it. Cough cough. Wu Ming was surprised that she knew his name Wu Ming. Even among the people who knew him, there were only a few people who knew his name, Wu Ming. In addition, the 3 extra holy grails at this singularity were arranged by the Magic King. Wu Ming had to guess whether Tamamonome knew his name because of the Magic King. Or perhaps, Tamamonome was simply a thug sent by the Magic King to deal with Wu Ming. At this moment, Wu Ming's mental power was completely released, and the range of thousands of meters had entered Wu Ming's perception range. Wu Ming's mental power was not only used to detect whether there were other enemies or traps around, but also to see if he had fallen into his opponent's illusion. Although Wu Ming could be said to be immune to illusion, Wu Ming was only immune to his own illusion. If it was not used on Wu Ming himself but used to change the surrounding environment, Wu Ming might still fall into the trap if he was not aware of it. To make a simple analogy, if you put an illusion on a stone, in theory, let the stone think that it was a flower, then the stone would think that it was a flower, and then with the help of magical power, it would make people see that there was a flower in the original position of the stone. It was similar to a simple magic trick. However, now that Wu Ming had completely released his mental power, he did not have to worry. The other party did not play any tricks. "I learned about your identity through touching the Holy Grail, Wu Ming-sama." Tamamonome did not care about Wu Ming strangling her neck, as if she trusted Wu Ming and smiled. Holy Grail. Hearing Tamamonome's words, Wu Ming thought of such an example, but the other party did not come into contact with the Holy Grail, but with him. Back in Winterwood City, Stheno, the eldest of the 3 Gorgon goddesses, obediently submitted to Wuming because she came into contact with Wuming and learned of his identity. Strictly speaking, Stheno had the divinity of the Earth Mother, and Tamamo no Mae also had an extremely close relationship with Amaterasu Amakami. If Tamamo no Mae learned of Wuming's identity because she came into contact with the Holy Grail, it would not be unreasonable. Compared to Stheno, who came into contact with him and learned of his information, Wuming felt that it was more reasonable for Tamamo no Mae to learn of his information because she came into contact with the Holy Grail. Although Wuming didn't have the same knowledge as Karna, he also monitored Tamamo no Mae's every move, including a series of details such as breathing, every hair moved by the wind, and so on. In addition, Wuming found that there was indeed no other servant-level magic power in this hall except for the servant-level magic power in front of him. There was no doubt that Tamamo no Mae did not lie. Wuming slowly loosened his hand holding Tamamo no Mae's neck and looked at Tamamo no Mae deeply. I still can't completely believe you. If you want to prove yourself, then you have to stay here. If I find you elsewhere, I will immediately regard you as an enemy and kill you at all costs. How about it? After all, if the other party lied, then it was most likely the Magic King's trick. In that case, it was a risk to let Tamamo no Mae stay here for a second. That was why Wuming said that he would kill Tamamo no Mae at all costs. After hearing Wuming's words, Tamamo no Mae nodded happily. There was no doubt that Tamamo no Mae agreed. No problem. I will wait here for my husband to come back and pick me up. I wish my husband good luck. With that, Tamamo no Mae bent her upper body, folded her hands, and lay on the ground like a Japanese woman saluting her husband. Facing Tamamo no Mae calling him husband, Wuming frowned. This is only the first time we've met. You've only learned about me from the Holy Grail, and you've already taken the liberty to say that you want to marry me. I will definitely reject such shallow love. Don't call me husband anymore. Marriage without love is meaningless in Wuming's view. Wuming is not a man who can't walk away when he sees a beautiful woman, and he won't readily agree just because the other party is throwing herself at him. After all, Wuming still has a few love debts. How can he add one more? Yes, I understand, Selen-sama. This time, Wuming nodded with satisfaction. She didn't call him Wuming but Selen-sama. This means that she is a smart person. Wuming likes to deal with smart people. Then you can stay here. You didn't lie. I will come back and thank you. With that, Wuming immediately turned and left. I wish you good luck. After Wuming's figure disappeared, Tamamo no Mae smiled again. Hee, such an excellent husband will be taken away by others if I don't hurry. I am the Tamamo no Mae who wants to be a virtuous wife, and I have already given you a greeting gift, my husband. Although she said that, Tamamo no Mae's eyes were a bit scary. Unfortunately, Wuming had already left and didn't see this scene. On the way back to the city gate, Wuming began to think about the information he collected so far. According to Tamamo no Mae's information, as well as Wuming's own investigation, Shitendaji was no longer in the central hall. There were two reasons why Shitendaji set up this poison city. First, she needed to make Wuming think that she was in the center of the poison city. After all, if they were to fight, Shitendaji's domain would be very advantageous. However, Wuming forgot that last time. Even after Shitendaji left, her noble artifact could still operate on its own. This time it might be the same. Then, why did this self-operating poison city attract Wuming? Naturally, it was to let Shitendaji escape. This was also the second reason. The entire place was filled with magic filled with poison. Under normal circumstances, Wuming wouldn't be able to detect small magic movements. This way, it was very likely that Shitendaji had already escaped from the city. From Wuming's point of view, Shitendaji wasn't a demon who would run away before a fight even started. Not to mention, Ibaraki Duji was still here. And even if Shitendaji left, where could she go? There was only one answer, which was to find Godatsi and Matthew outside the city. Although Shitendaji wouldn't run away because of fear, he wasn't an idiot either. He wouldn't just sit there and wait for an enemy that he couldn't defeat to find trouble with him. Thus, the wisest choice was to lead the main force away and ambush the enemy's weak point. And what if Shitendaji was the follower sent by the Magic King? Godatsi was the only hope for humanity, at least for now. Then, as long as he eliminated Godatsi, the Magic King wouldn't have any worries. As for why Shitendaji was so sure that only Wuming and Karna would come in, it could only be said that this was very likely a part of the plan. Wuming guessed that even if Godatsi and Matthew came in, Shitendaji probably had a way to separate them. As expected of the leader of the great mountains, the son of the great god Ibaraki. His brain isn't any worse than a human's. Humans didn't have power, so they honed their intelligence. Demons had power, so they abandoned their intelligence. And as the son of the demon god, Shitendaji was very smart. Now, there was someone in front of him who was stalling for time. Shitendaji told me that even if I die today, I'll drag you here. Chapter 5:12. Ibaraki Doji said domineeringly to Wuming. The bone sword in his hand was faintly discernible. Although he couldn't tell if Ibaraki Doji was also immune to the Holy Grail, he was able to walk through the poison as if it didn't exist. But then again, since he lived so close to Shitendaji all year round and wasn't poisoned, he should have some sort of immunity. Who cares? There was one thing that was without a doubt. Ibaraki Doji was sent by Shitendaji to stop Wuming. You're quite well-mannered, Ibaraki. Wuming greeted Ibaraki Doji. Waha, it's all right. After all, I have something like the Holy Grail. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk shut up. You and I aren't close enough to greet each other. Ibaraki Doji laughed, but then realized that this was an enemy, so he quickly changed his attitude. No matter how he looked at it, Ibaraki Doji seemed unreliable, but no matter what, he was still the well-known Rashomon ghost, Ibaraki Doji. If that's the case, then Shitendaji must have gone to find Karna, Silence said calmly. He. Shitendaji is obviously looking for that human girl. Why would he go find that terrifying son? Asterisk cough cough asterisk of course. It's not that Shitendaji is afraid of that guy. It's just that there's no need to understand. The son was obviously referring to Karna. Like a child, Ibaraki Doji was trying very hard to protect Shitendaji. Is that so? Thank you, Ibaraki Doji. Wuming smiled lightly. Now he was sure of Shitendaji's whereabouts. On the other hand, Shitendaji who heard Wuming's thanks had a strange expression. Forget it, I don't care what you're saying. If it wasn't for that son, how could I have escaped so pathetically? Asterisk cough cough asterisk retreat, and I was even mocked by that sun fox, damn it. Ibaraki Doji didn't realize that he had fallen into Wuming's trap, and was still throwing a tantrum. Sure enough, anything related to the sun isn't a good thing. You too. Today let me Ibaraki Dojo, end your light. With a roar, Ibaraki Dojo's left hand stabbed the bone blade into the ground, then raised his right hand and aimed at Wuming. Thou must experience the true appearance of us ghosts. His right arm, which had been severed by a treacherous scheme and then regained after losing it, had turned into a freak. Let's go, Hellfire. In an instant, Ibaraki Kido's right hand burned with a strange flame. It turned out that the reason why the servants liked to chant before releasing their noble phantoms was to strengthen their noble phantoms. Of course, there was also a saying that it was more handsome. Asterisk cough asterisk. Just as Wuming was about to release his noble artifact to receive the attack, Wuming realized that Ibaraki boy had not fully released his noble artifact. It's not over yet. Ibaraki Kido's left hand moved away from the bone sword and placed it on his right hand. There's more than just this amount of karmic fire. Let the karmic fire of the great mountains burn. In an instant, the flame on Ibaraki Kido's right arm skyrocketed, showing an extreme golden color. Ibaraki Dojo's body was completely engulfed in flames. The only thing that could be seen was that red to the point of gold, and then gold to the point of blackening. This time, Wuming did not dare to be careless. It was obvious that his opponent had combined two noble phantoms into one. Moreover, in Wuming's perception, Wuming clearly noticed that Ibaraki Kido's spiritual base was gradually collapsing. There was no doubt that this was the last noble phantoms of the fused life. Dual noble phantoms coupled with the burning of life, this was the degree of 1 + 1 + 1 greater than 3. The power was much stronger than the previous military noble phantoms, and it was comparable to the holy sword. In short, Wuming did not have the confidence to block Ibaraki Kido's double noble phantoms that sacrificed his life. However, Ibaraki Kido's action of burning life touched Wuming's heart. Wuming remembered what Ibaraki Kido had said before. Even if I die today, I will drag you here with me. Those who could become heroic spirits were all heroes without exception. However, the reason why anti-heroes could become heroic spirits and enter the martyr's palace was because of their merits. Entering the martyr's palace after death was not only a comfort of losing one's freedom, but also a recognition of two great restraints. Wuming was deeply touched by Ibaraki Kido's spirit of sacrificing himself for Shitendaji, which went beyond friendship. Wuming smiled gratifyingly. Then, I'll properly receive your strongest attack, Ibaraki Kido. After saying that, the spear in Wuming's hand dissipated into mana. Wuming opened his arms, and the armor on his body was completely removed from Wuming's body. Wuming's noble phantoms were permanent noble phantoms, but it did not mean that they could not be released. Finally, the removed armor gathered in front of Wuming, constantly changing and combining. A holy knight's shield that was as tall as a person, similar to Matthew's shield, floated in front of Wuming. Wuming was dressed in white. He grabbed the handle behind the shield and placed it on the ground. This is my strongest noble phantoms, the proof of my identity as the strongest knight Vilo Silenst. It's a concept defensive noble phantoms. Ibaraki Kido did not release his noble phantoms. Instead, he quietly listened to Wuming's speech. Wuming did not know if Ibaraki Kido was still alive, as he could no longer sense his aura. Let me see if your feelings for Shitendaji, which surpasses friendship, can break this knight's proof and concept relic. Wuming's words were like an opportunity. After Wuming finished speaking, Ibaraki Boy's final noble artifact was released. The black gold ghostly hand left Ibaraki Boy. After it left, the ghostly hand continued to expand until it became incomparably huge. It was as if Ibaraki Boy had really sacrificed his life. The final cry of the noble artifact sounded incomparably mournful in Wuming's ears. Gift mined Arthur's gift armor. Wuming did not shout with all his might like Ibaraki Dojo. Instead, he was like a holy king, calmly and elegantly reading out the true name of the noble artifact. In an instant, the knight's shield that was as tall as a person shone brightly. There was nothing fancy about it. The knight's shield merely released a light film. The defensive wall formed by the light film started from the shield. The light film first enveloped Wuming, then it began to expand up, down, left, and right. It was like a giant shield of light that was constantly expanding. When the ghostly hand approached Wuming, it had expanded to a height of 100 meters. It was like a monstrous devil's hand, trying to grab Wuming. The defensive wall in front of Wuming seemed to be responding to Ibaraki Boy's noble artifact. It expanded to the same width and height as the black gold ghostly hand. In the next second, the giant ghostly hand and the defensive light film came into contact. Rumble! In front of the central hall, Tamamonome was still half kneeling in front of the hall, looking at the nuclear explosion that happened not far away. Because of Wuming's defensive light film, the impact of the explosion did not spread to her. Even the sound of the explosion did not reach her. Before Wuming and Ibaraki Boy released their noble artifacts, Tamamonome had already noticed that something was wrong. The magical waves were too strong. She saw with her own eyes that a giant ghostly hand that was constantly expanding collided with a defensive light film. She had witnessed this miracle. Sometimes, I'm really jealous of Shitendaji. Tamamonome shook her head as if she was feeling sorry for Ibaraki Boy. Then she closed her eyes and fell into silence. After all, Wuming's request was not to move. Tamamonome chose to meditate. On the other hand, Karna and Suzaku Misaki were affected by the explosion. Suzaku Misaki was blown to the side. Karna tried his best to stabilize himself and looked at the explosion. Is this Celander's doing? Then I should end this quickly. Outside the city, Gudatsi stood behind Matthew. She was shocked by the huge explosion in the city. Matthew did not have the time to care about the explosion in the city. Instead, he focused on Shitendaji in front of him. However, Shitendaji was not paying attention to Matthew and Gudatsi. Instead, he was looking at the explosion. She could sense that it was Ibaraki Boy's noble artifact. He, as expected, Ibaraki, you're an idiot. Chapter 5:13. Although Shitendaji was smiling, his smile wasn't sincere. On the contrary, there was a hint of pain in his smile, but Shitendaji managed to cover it up. She did tell Ibaraki to try his best to stop Wuming, but she didn't tell him to risk his life. Shitendaji liked to tease Ibaraki Duji, but that was also a kind of love. Ibaraki knew this, so he tried to delay Wuming. For the sake of Shitendaji, Ibaraki sacrificed himself. Although they were both servants, it wasn't easy to meet a close friend. Moreover, servants could be said to have a second life. To be able to meet a close friend in a second life, Shitendaji was very happy. He opened his wine gourd, smiled, and took a sip. Shitendaji no longer paid attention to the explosion. Then, let's continue. I'm looking forward to seeing if the little girl can block my poison, he. Matthew clenched his teeth with a bitter expression. This time, it's really bad. At this time, a white angel walked out from the side. In the center of the explosion, where Wuming was. Wuming didn't hear any sound, and he didn't see any color other than white. The light membrane calculated the explosion from the collision of the noble phantasm as damage, and the dazzling light from the noble phantasm as damage. Therefore, Wuming's noble phantasm isolated the sound and scene. That was why Wuming could only see white and couldn't hear the explosion. However, one thing was certain. Wuming successfully defended against Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm. Because Wuming's noble phantasm wasn't destroyed, Wuming didn't die was the best proof. However, this was how it should be. It's such a pity, Ibaraki Duji. The concept noble phantasm under the time paradox can't be destroyed by flames comparable to the sacred sword. This was Wuming's biggest cheat. After leaving Connaught, Wuming accidentally obtained a set of worn-out armor. Because of a magic scroll, he came to Camello, and that set of armor became Wuming's armor as a Knight of the Round Table. After Wuming left, Artoria took it back and no one knew where it went. Connaught's timeline was the 5th century BC, while Camelot's timeline was the 5th century AD. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a problem for Wuming to bring the armor to the future. However, the problem lay with the scroll. The scroll that Merlin used to summon him was undoubtedly made by Wuming. He could see that, but the scroll appeared thousands of years ago without any trace. If there was no problem with it, Wuming wouldn't believe it. There was no doubt that this was a problem with the scroll. Before he was summoned by Merlin with the scroll, Wuming had discovered the scroll that contained his own blood and was completely made by himself. Assuming that after Wuming was summoned, Merlin used the scroll that was passed down in the past to summon Wuming. Then who made the scroll? Wuming didn't make it, but it was undoubtedly made by Wuming. Wuming had put the scroll in his own space, so the only possibility was the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay. Although the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay was similar to the one made by Wuming, it didn't have Wuming's blood. Assuming that Wuming in Camelot was codenamed Present Wuming, and Wuming in Connaught was Past Wuming. Then there was an inference. After the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay in Camelot sucked the present Wuming away, it was also sucked into the space-time tunnel. There might have been a trace of blood on it. After entering the space-time tunnel, it went to the past and was found by the past Wuming. Then, the past Wuming was sucked away. The scroll wasn't taken away by Wuming, but was passed down 1,000 years in the future, where it was used by Merlin, who then sucked the past Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away at the same time as Merlin sucked the Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away and became the present Wuming. Wuming rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. Looks like I'll have to investigate this thoroughly after returning to the origin. It is still possible for the soundless in the Great Root to know such a thing. After all, administrators have to be good at using their authority. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Wuming only used a little bit of administrator authority. Through the power of the origin and the power of the Holy Grail held by Maeve, he cheated by recreating the armor that came with the time paradox. The strength of this armor was no doubt no weaker than Avalon's. Since it was made by the origin, it must be a masterpiece. While Wuming was thinking, the relic slowly came into contact with him. Since the danger was gone, it was naturally gone. After contact, the shield formed by the armor automatically disintegrated, turning into a new set of armor and attaching itself to Wuming's body. This time, the armor was even holier than before, as if the effect of the true name liberation was still there. Wuming touched the helmet. Due to the big explosion, he knew from the central hall that the city gate was no longer poisonous. Due to the influence of Ibaraki's karmic fire and Wuming's holy light, as well as the storm caused by the explosion, the poison in the soil and the poison in the air were all blown away, burned, and purified. Then, Wuming looked at Ibaraki Dojo. At this moment, Ibaraki Dojo had completely disappeared. Only the place where Ibaraki Dojo used to be was left with a little bit of magic crystals. Regardless of whether the opponent was alive or dead, Ibaraki Dojo would not be able to survive the final blow of sacrificing his life. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to this. Then, he ran straight to the city gate. After all, there were no enemies blocking the way. Wuming ran straight to the city gate using the shortest route between 2 points. Near the city gate, Wuming ran into Karna. At this moment, Suzaku Guzan, who was opposite Karna, had disappeared. This meant that Karna had defeated Suzaku Guzan. As expected of Karna. You really won. However, in response to Wuming's compliment, Karna shook his head. My opponent went easy on me. This was a bit strange. However, since Karna said that his opponent had gone easy on him, then he must have gone easy on him. Karna would not lie. Let's not talk about this for now. Tachika is in danger. Shutendaji is going to look for her. Then, Wuming and Karna went to look for Godatsi. On the way, Karna told Wuming about the battle between him and Suzaku Guzan. Suzaku Guzan's exquisite noble phantasm had indeed hit Karna, but it had not seriously injured him. After that, Karna had been fighting Suzaku Guzan in close combat. This was because Karna had discovered that Suzaku Guzan's noble phantasm was based on telekinesis. Therefore, when fighting in close combat, Suzaku Guzan would definitely be wary. In the beginning, because Suzaku Guzan was fighting Karna in close combat, no matter how exquisite her control was, if Karna wanted to play tricks, it was very likely that a few katanas would rebound and hit Suzaku Guzan. This was the disadvantage of being too close to the enemy. Karna had been affected by Wuming and Ibaraki Doji's explosion, so he felt that he should end the battle quickly. Then, after releasing the noble phantasm, Suzaku Guzan symbolically dodged and was hit. There was no doubt that Suzaku Guzan had gone easy on him. Although he did not know why Suzaku Guzan had gone easy on him, the outcome was good. Shutendaji was the only one missing. Then when Wuming and Karna found Godatsi and Matthew, they found that Nightingale had appeared beside them at some point. Shutendaji, on the other hand, was drinking wine with a smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at him, Shutendaji looked quite depressed. Chapter 5:14. When he saw that Godatsi was fine, Wuming was relieved. It was obvious that Shutendaji didn't attack Godatsi because of Nightingale, who appeared out of nowhere. I failed completely this time. I don't have a good relationship with this lady. Shutendaji seemed to have given up and said to Wuming. Although Wuming didn't understand Nightingale's ability, seeing that she was a nurse, he guessed that her noble phantasm should be something like healing or purification. And from Shutendaji's current expression, it could be seen that Nightingale's ability completely restrained her. That's true, Shutendaji. Wuming was no longer anxious because there were only 2 servants left in the Nippon faction, and Tamamonome seemed to be on Wuming's side. In fact, Wuming's guess was correct. When Shutendaji used poison to attack Godatsi and Matthew, Nightingale calmly walked out of the forest and released her noble phantasm. As a result, Shutendaji's poison was completely purified. At this moment, the wine that Shutendaji drank was poison-free. I have to say, Shutendaji is really unlucky when it comes to luck. Even Godatsi couldn't help but ridicule. According to Godatsi's judgment, Shutendaji spent a lot of effort to get out of Denver and attack her, the last master. But in the end, at the final moment, a servant that completely countered Shutendaji appeared out of nowhere. Just how unlucky was Seiji to meet such a servant? After all, Nightingale left in the middle of the night chasing after Achilles, who knew that he would meet her here. Well, actually, I've always been unlucky. Looking at the confident Shutendaji, Wuming subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Wuming knew just how dangerous Shutendaji was, so he chose to immediately attack Shutendaji. The holy spear pierced toward Shutendaji, but Shutendaji didn't try to defend or dodge. I remember that you are looking for the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail is no longer in my hands. The holy spear stopped right before Shutendaji's neck. This is the second time we've met, Shutendaji, although I'm not sure if you still remember me. Although Wuming spoke to Shutendaji, he still kept the holy spear at Shutendaji's neck. Of course I remember. I clearly remember that you chopped off my head, Shutendaji said in a satisfied tone, not at all like he was being held captive. No matter if it's Ibaraki, Tamamonome, or even Suzuka Guzan, the golden light on their bodies, as well as this continuous poison, were all created by me through the Holy Grail. Shutendaji said everything without hesitation. However, I didn't bring the Holy Grail with me. Shutendaji smiled. Then, if Shutendaji didn't bring the Holy Grail with him, where did he put it? The central hall had been infiltrated by his mental power, but there was no trace of the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji had already left. Could it be Tamamame? Wuming fell into deep thought. Wuming felt that he had overlooked something. Suddenly, Wuming's pupils shrank as he thought of something. This city was undoubtedly a noble artifact, and it was one that had been blessed by the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan didn't have such a legend. Although Ibaraki Doji and Shutendaji had said that they had built a city in the mountains, this city wasn't suitable for ghosts. As for Tamamonome, she didn't have any legends of a city. In that case, there must be a hidden follower, and this city must belong to that follower. Shutendaji seemed to have seen through Wuming's thoughts and smiled. That's right, I gave the Holy Grail to the owner of this city. After all, I didn't plan to go back, Shutendaji smiled. However, this smile was quite familiar to Wuming. It was the same smile that Shutendaji had before he left in the Winterwood City. Pucci, Wuming stabbed his spear into Shutendaji's neck, but Shutendaji smiled. She was disappearing bit by bit. Although Shutendaji couldn't speak because Wuming had pierced his throat, Wuming was able to read Shutendaji's words through the shape of his mouth. I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. Then, Shutendaji turned into magic and dissipated. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth began to shake violently. Matthew supported Gudatsi, who almost fell. Karna and Nightingale looked behind Wuming. Wuming turned around and looked at the huge Denver City, or Himeji City. In the second half of Himeji City, a huge pillar rose from the ground. Countless eyes were inlaid on this huge pillar of flesh, turning and blinking from time to time. It was very terrifying. That's a demon god pillar? Gudatsi cried out in surprise. After all, Gudatsi had already experienced 4 singularities and encountered many demon god pillars, so she naturally recognized it. Nightingale and Karna were also shocked. After all, the aura emitted by the huge pillar of flesh in the distance was a bit terrifying. While everyone was surprised, Wuming shook his head helplessly. I was tricked by Shutendaji again. Shutendaji set up Poison City and sent Ibaraki Doji, Lulu Guzan, and Tamamonome to intercept Wuming. It seemed that they were going to attack Gudatsi, and Wuming would quickly return to protect Gudatsi. But in fact they were misled. With this plan, Wuming and others were transferred away, giving the servant at the back of Himeji City an opportunity to summon the demon god pillar. However, according to Shutendaji's words, I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. It was very likely that this demon god pillar was controlled by Shutendaji. This also proved why it took so long to summon the demon god pillar, because it needed Shutendaji's consciousness to be stored in this huge pillar of flesh. Sure enough, it confirmed Wuming's thoughts once again. Even if Shutendaji left, he must have left me a lot of trouble. Karna, you stay with Matthew and Nightingale to protect Tachika. I'll go meet that guy. Wuming said to Karna. Karna didn't speak, just nodded, and then stood beside Gudatsi. Although Gudatsi always had Matthew by her side, she couldn't guarantee that she could completely protect some powerful servants. Just like Shutendaji just now, Matthew found it a little difficult to defend against the pervasive poisonous gas. Also because of guilt, Matthew didn't speak, but obediently stayed by Gudatsi's side. Gudatsi, on the other hand, seemed to be in a bad mood. That's the demon god pillar. How can I let you go alone? Gudatsi mercilessly rejected Wuming's proposal. Although Matthew didn't speak, the worry in his eyes was still seen by Wuming. Wuming stared blankly, then laughed. Don't worry, didn't I say? I'm not an ordinary servant. Wuming smiled and comforted the two. But Gudatsi still didn't agree, and wanted to refute. Trust me, you and Matthew staying here will make me feel more at ease. Wuming looked at Gudatsi and Matthew firmly. It wasn't that the two of them were burdens. Well, in fact, it was a little bit. Cough cough. The most important thing was that Wuming believed that the demon god pillar was controlled by Shutendaji. Facing a different demon god pillar, Wuming really didn't feel at ease letting Gudatsi and Matthew go with him. And with Wuming's strength, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with the demon god pillar with some effort. It was also because of this that Karna agreed to stay and let Wuming go to the battlefield alone. Although the two of them seemed to be tied in the previous battle, Karna knew that he couldn't beat Wuming, who cheated. Since that was the case, he had enough strength on the battlefield, so he was responsible for protecting Gudatzi. In the end, Gudatzi and Matthew nodded and chose to believe in Wuming. Wuming realized that one of them was missing. Where did Nightingale go? Gudatzi and Matthew also realized that Nightingale was missing. At this time, Karna, who was loyally acting as a weapon, spoke. As for the nurse, she ran toward the demon god pillar while you were talking. As expected of the obedient Karna. If you don't ask, he won't say. Wuming rubbed his forehead with a slight headache. Chapter 5:15. At the back of Jilu City, the huge tentacle-like demon god pillars were wriggling about. The eyes on the demon god pillars would turn from time to time, blinking, looking particularly terrifying. A strange sound came from the demon god pillar. It was a sound that humans and even servants could not make. This was the unique cry of the demon god pillars. Along with the demon god pillar's cry, dense purple fog was emitted from the demon god pillar's eyes. The purple mist didn't move fast, but it was very powerful. The first half of the Holy Grail enhanced version of Jilu City was basically destroyed by Wuming and Ibaraki's noble artifacts. However, the second half of Jilu City was still intact because of Wuming's noble artifacts. When the purple fog emitted by the demon god pillars came in contact with the palaces and pavilions of Jilu City, the moment it came in contact with them, those palaces and pavilions were immediately corroded. It was like a deadly poison. Although the purple fog moved slowly, because it didn't encounter any resistance, gradually, the buildings in the back half of Jilu City, with the demon god pillars as the center, melted away. Taking a closer look, nearly half of the buildings in the back half of Jilu City had been corroded and melted away. The melted buildings were like ordinary water that blended into the ground. Although the ground wasn't decayed, the gradual blackening of the ground proved that it didn't escape the corrosion of the poison. Nightingale pledge, I will eradicate all poisons and all harmful things. In an instant, along with the release of the true name of this precious artifact, a part of the purple mist in front of the demon god pillar disappeared, including the ground that had already turned black. The ground returned to its original color. Not only that, but there were also signs of sprouting on the ground that was covered by the relic. Oh, it's your nurse again? We really don't get along well. At this moment, Shutendaji's voice came from the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar's voice wasn't completely Shutendaji's. There was a strange sound mixed in as well, which was probably the demon god pillar's own voice. Without a doubt, Wuming's guess was correct. However, Nightingale did not answer demon god Shuting's question. Instead, she tried her best to unleash her noble artifact. Nightingale's noble phantasm, I will eradicate all poisons, all harmful things, forbidden phantasm, was an area with Nightingale as the center. It could nullify all poisons and attacks. This noble phantasm was a concept noble phantasm. It was a combination of the spiritual sublimation of Nightingale, who galloped on the battlefield and faced death, coupled with various anecdotes of her, as well as the concept of angel in white who helped the sick and wounded, which was established in modern times. It was proven that a concept relic had an advantage over a physical relic. It was a grade C+ anti-army relic. I will eradicate all poisonous and harmful creatures. The territory that it displayed was like an invincible holy territory. There was no poison or harm at all. The surrounding purple fog surged violently into this area, intending to corrode it. However, no matter how much of it there was, it was useless. The poison that entered was completely eliminated by this precious artifact. As this noble phantasm was centered around Nightingale, while Nightingale was unleashing her noble phantasm, she was constantly moving towards demon god Shutting. However, as the range of the noble phantasm was not very large, the moving Nightingale had already seen such a scene. Amidst a large expanse of purple mist, a circle without any purple mist was moving towards the most important sky pillar. It gave off a feeling of a mantis trying to stop a chariot and overestimating its own capabilities. However, that was the truth. Looking at Nightingale, who was moving towards him with all her might, demon god Shutting laughed. Heh. If it was the previous me, you would indeed be my nemesis. However, this is a demon god pillar, Miss Nurse. The moment demon god Shutting finished speaking, An even thicker dark purple fog emerged from behind the demon god pillar. Just by looking at it, Nightingale, who was a berserker, could feel the danger from it. The dark purple fog contained a large amount of magic and rushed towards Nightingale's noble phantasm domain at an extremely fast speed. No matter what it was, there was a limit to it. Wuming's almost infinite magic, Avalon, which was rumored to be able to block even a world-defying noble phantasm, and Nightingale's noble phantasm domain were the same. The reason why Wuming's magic was said to be infinite was because of his overly large base, super recovery speed, and the fact that he had no place to use these 3 points. The reason why Avalon could block the world-defying noble phantasm was because Avalon had not encountered a stronger attack. At the very least, Wuming believed that if he used the Great Source to launch an attack, Avalon would not be able to block it. Since that was the case, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain also had its limits. It seemed like Nightingale's noble phantasm could completely restrain Shutting Doji's poison. However, if it encountered a large amount of poison that could not be eliminated in time, or if it was not poison but a powerful magic attack, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain might not be able to eliminate it completely. Demon God Shutting had such a plan. He did not continue to release poison. Instead, he released the Demon God Pillar's Demon Fog skill. The powerful Demon Fog surged towards Nightingale's domain. As expected, although Nightingale's noble phantasm had eliminated part of the mana fog, most of it remained and continued to fly toward Nightingale within the noble phantasm. Nightingale did not say a word, allowing the dark purple fog to gradually approach her. She knew that she could not resist it. Mystery would be ineffective in front of a higher level of mystery. This was probably the theory behind it. Nightingale was considered a modern person. In terms of mystery, she was much weaker than the Demon God Pillar. Moreover, Nightingale's noble phantasm was only a grade C noble phantasm. It was impossible for it to eliminate any damage. In this case, Nightingale, who did not have any other powerful abilities, might be defeated this time due to Berserker's impulsiveness. However, she did not regret it. If she wanted Berserker to regret it, she might have to wait until her next life. Of course, if Nightingale was alone, she would definitely be defeated here. However, there was no doubt that Nightingale was not alone. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of chains, Nightingale was tied up by a silver-white chain and was pulled out of the attack range of the dark purple fog. "Oh, you're not satisfied with the speed?" Demon God Shutting spoke again. "After all, no matter if it's Shitendaji or the Demon God Pillar, they're all my enemies," Wuming replied Demon God Shutting calmly as he kept the pseudo-heavenly lock back into the golden ripple. As Nightingale's noble phantasm was still activated, although the poisonous fog had spread over, it did not corrode Wuming. Then play with me for a while. My new enemy." Looking at the dark purple fog that was controlled by Demon God Shutting, Wuming began to recall what Tamamonome had said. Chapter 5:16. Wuming was on his way to Demon God Shutting. When Wuming passed by the central Great Hall, he discovered that Tamamonome was still sitting on the platform in front of the hall, not moving at all. And at this moment, the omnipresent poison gas was emitted from the central Great Hall, about to reach Tamamonome. Even people who didn't know what the mist was would feel danger, let alone Wuming who knew what the purple mist was. Wuming extended his hand and golden ripples appeared. The pseudo-heaven lock appeared from the ripples and in an instant, the pseudo-heaven lock wrapped around Tamamonome. Immediately afterwards, Wuming waved his hand and the chains pulled Tamamonome over. Tamamonome didn't resist and let Wuming pull her over with the chains. Catching Tamamonome and retrieving the chains, Wuming asked subconsciously, "Why are you still here? The Demon God Pillar's attack is already here." The reason why Wuming asked this was because even if Tamamonome had the immunity granted by the Holy Grail, even if she could defend against the Demon God Pillar's poison, the Demon God Pillar still had other attacks. Since the poison gas could reach here, the Demon God Pillar's other attacks would naturally be able to as well. However, in response to Wuming's question, Tamamonome smiled sweetly. "Didn't you tell me to stay here? This is your promise." Tamamonome winked at Wuming like a mischievous child. With Tamamonome's words, Wuming felt rather awkward. Actually, Wuming didn't care about his words at all. Seeing that Tamamonome had told him the truth, Wuming only warned Tamamonome not to play any tricks behind his back. Wuming only used the words, Stay here and don't go anywhere to warn her. Wuming didn't think that Tamamonome wouldn't do anything in the face of danger. Who would have thought that Tamamonome would be so serious? Take it that I didn't say it well. However, remember this. You can go back on an unimportant agreement like this when your life is in danger. Wu Ming said very seriously. But that was my first promise with you. I don't want to break it just like that. However, since you personally came to help me break the promise, then I'll let it go this time. Tamamonome smiled, acknowledging Wu Ming's words. Also, Lord Surrender, how much longer are you planning to hug me? Tamamonome smiled innocently. Wu Ming's expression turned awkward, and he quickly put down Tamamonome. After using the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Tamamonome over, Wu Ming withdrew the heaven lock. Wu Ming then hugged Tamamonome like hugging a cat. Speaking of which, hugging Tamamonome was no different from hugging a cat. Cough cough. Back to the main topic. Since you've kept your promise, I'll temporarily treat you as my partner. Keep walking towards the city gate and meet up with Chaldea's master. Although Wu Ming said that he would treat Tamamonome as his partner purely because of the promise, Wu Ming did not completely believe him. Who would completely believe a strange woman who was originally an enemy but suddenly said that she wanted to marry you when she saw you? Seeing that Tamamonome did not try anything funny, Wu Ming decided to temporarily let her join the party. Moreover, even if Tamamonome betrayed him, it would be fine. Karnak was there, so he was not afraid of Tamamonome betraying him. Tamamonome nodded regretfully, as if she was unhappy that she did not become his wife. However, Tamamonome seemed to have thought of something, and she nodded honestly, and then asked, "What about you, Lord Surrender? If I'm not wrong, you're going to destroy the demon god pillars, right?" Wu Ming naturally nodded and admitted it. There was nothing to hide. Could it be that Wu Ming came here specifically to save Tamamonome? Wu Ming and Tamamonome's relationship was not that good. Regarding this, I have something to say. Tamamonome bowed to Wu Ming, as if she was really putting herself in the position of a subject. Wu Ming nodded. Since there was information, he naturally had to listen to it. After Wu Ming nodded, Tamamonome spoke. Actually, the Holy Grail was placed with Judge Ji, but I feel that this matter has nothing to do with her. It was completely planned by Shitendaji. You are indeed the concubine of justice. Wu Ming nodded. Previously, when Shitendaji had mouthed to Wu Ming to wait for you in Jiro City, Wu Ming had more or less guessed it. After all, Jiro City was the residence of Judge Ji, the monster of the city. It wasn't strange for it to become a noble artifact. Actually, when your noble artifact landed in this city, even though Judge Haim borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, in order to resist your somewhat cheating noble artifact, Judge Haim herself probably didn't have a good time waiting for me. Shitendaji didn't take back the Holy Grail and instead left it with Judge Haim. Hearing this, Wu Ming came to a realization. This made sense. Even if Wu Ming's abnormal cheating noble artifact was blocked by Jiro City, it shouldn't have left Jiro City in ruins. It shouldn't have left anything behind and directly exploded into ashes. If he borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, then it made sense. Listen to your nonsense. Have you never seen Judge Ji? Wu Ming asked. After all, Tamamonome's words showed that she didn't know the truth. That's right. Surrender-sama. Shitendaji asked me to stand guard here after Punbu-ji blocked your noble artifact. I will try my best to delay you with the formation of the formation. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji were also sent out. Then, Wu Ming knew what happened after that. Karna stalled Suzaku Guzan, Wu Ming came here and was told the reason by Tamamonome, and when he returned, he was stopped by Ibaraki. They fought and Ibaraki self-destructed. In the end, Shitendaji died, but the demon god pillar was summoned. Actually, I wanted to visit Judge Ji after you left and retrieve the Holy Grail for you. But because of the agreement between you and me, I didn't do so. Wu Ming raised his eyebrows. So you're blaming me? Okay, it seems like you're blaming me. Asterisk cough cough asterisk Wu Ming shook his head and said, I don't think that even if you take the Holy Grail away, the demon god pillar can't be summoned. Wu Ming believed that Shitendaji's death was the trigger for the demon god pillar to be summoned. It was very likely that Shitendaji had done something to the Holy Grail from the beginning, using his own life as the trigger. Once Shitendaji left, the Holy Grail would automatically activate and summon the demon god pillar with Shitendaji's consciousness. Moreover, it's hard to say if you can defeat Judge Ji. Actually, when Wuming was hugging Tamamonome, Wuming had already noticed that Tamamonome didn't have much fighting strength. Compared to the white-faced golden-haired nine-tailed fox Tamamonome who was recorded as one of the three demons, the current Tamamonome was just a support fox. Although that's the case, I don't think that Judge Ji will fight back. Tamamonome smiled. This made Wuming puzzled. Could it be that these two were good friends? Chapter 5:17. Facing Wuming's doubts, Tamamonome covered her mouth with her sleeve and smiled. That's what your concubine thinks. That's why your concubine said that the summoning of the demon god pillar had nothing to do with Judge Haim. Damn, she's even keeping me in suspense. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Nightingale probably can't hold on any longer. With that, Wuming prepared to leave. Wuming-sama. Tamamonome suddenly opened her mouth and called Wuming by his real name. Wuming turned his head and stared at Tamamon. Facing Wuming's stare, Tamamonome smiled apologetically and said, "You're an existence blessed by Amaterasu Amakami's incarnation. Make good use of that power." With that, Wuming left. After all, if he delayed any longer, Nightingale really wouldn't be able to hold on. Following that, Wuming recalled the scene from before. Wuming used the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Nightingale back. Blessing from the sun god? Wuming recalled Tamamonome's words and thought of the sun rain. By the way, Shitendaji, have you ever felt the despair brought by the sun? With that, Wuming closed his eyes and began to feel the mysterious power that entered his body without him noticing. Oh, I didn't even feel despair from Minamoto no Reiko. Can you make me feel despair? Demon god Shitendaji let out a strange sound. Following that, he began to make the first move. The countless eyes on the demon god pillar spun faster and faster, gathering magical power. Following that, each eye released a heat ray comparable to a holy sword. The heat rays gathered together and formed a huge pillar of light with a diameter of 100 meters, attacking Wuming and Nightingale. Wuming opened his eyes and waved his hand. Gate! Nightingale chanted a simple incantation, and a purple ripple appeared beneath her feet. Nightingale fell down in an instant. After Wuming heard a scream, Nightingale was completely engulfed by the purple ripples. Arthur's gift armor. After releasing the concept relic once again, the armor on Wuming's body detached and formed a shield. The shield formed a light film and welcomed the heat rays that the demon god shutting shot out. ZZZ. The expected explosion did not happen. The shield's light membrane disintegrated all the heat rays from the demon god wine swallowing, turning them into pure magic power that spread out in all directions with a sizzling sound. Gate! Chanting the incantation again, Wuming's figure behind the shield disappeared, leaving only a purple ripple. Suddenly, the demon god pillar made an incomprehensible sound. It was a scream that belonged to the demon god pillar. Behind the demon god pillar, Wuming was holding his holy spear. The front half of the holy spear had already pierced one of the eyes behind the demon god pillar. Although there were eyes behind the demon god pillar, because Wuming appeared too quickly, the demon god pillar did not react at all. As for how Wuming came over, the purple ripple that was slowly closing behind Wuming became a powerful explanation. Wuming could use the teleportation portal to any place he had been to and any place he could see. Wuming pulled the holy spear out of the demon god pillar's eye, jumped back, and left the demon god pillar's body. The moment he left, a large amount of dark purple fog appeared from the eyes of the surrounding demon god pillars. Without a doubt, if Wuming did not dodge, he would have been enveloped by the dark purple fog. Without the protection of his armor, Wuming did not dare be careless. Even if the dark purple fog did not seem like poisonous fog, who knew whether it would dissolve in an instant? Because of the damage, the demon god pillar stopped releasing heat rays. And because of this, Wuming's noble artifact also stopped. However, Wuming did not let the noble artifact recover his armor. Compared to the permanent noble artifact's armor form, the shield form after true name liberation was much more useful. However, it was unable to move in time. The demon god Jiotun naturally noticed that the shield did not arrive at Wuming's side in time. Immediately, The eyes behind the demon god pillar began to revolve violently. Along with the condensation of magic, heat rays were also released. The target was naturally Wuming, who was behind the demon god pillar. Gate. The shield that appeared from the purple ripple blocked the demon god pillar's attack. Although the shield itself was unable to come over in time, Wuming had a way to make the shield come over. The teleportation gate that Wuming used to teleport behind the demon god pillar was not closed. Wuming expanded it and opened another teleportation gate in front of him. Naturally, the shield could come over. Next, Wuming used the teleportation gate to launch a sneak attack on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar attacked Wuming, while Wuming used the teleportation gate to block the damage. Although it seemed like Wuming had the advantage, that was not the case. Because Wuming had the concept noble artifact, the demon god pillar was unable to hurt Wuming. However, Wuming's attacks were also ineffective against the demon god pillar. Wuming stabbed in different places with his spear. However, after stabbing, the demon god pillar's powerful body would heal his injuries. One was the Dragon of Origin's spiritual base, while the other was the demon god pillar controlled by Shitendaji. Both of them were life forms with a high degree of mystery. This created a very awkward situation. Wuming could not hurt the demon god Shitendaji, while the demon god Shitendaji could not hurt Wuming. Ah, your tortoiseshell is really tough. Shitendaji was not upset at all. Your recovery ability is not bad either, demon god Shitendaji. Wuming replied. He, since that's the case, I won't play with you anymore. After demon god Shitendaji finished speaking, the huge demon god pillar began to move towards Gadatsi. She was not prepared to fight this unsolvable battle with Wuming. She was prepared to get rid of the most important person. Wuming would definitely not allow that. Once again, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at one of the demon god pillar's eyes and stabbed with the holy spear. The demon god pillar was already used to having its eyes pierced, and because Shitendaji was not prepared to pay attention to Wuming, the demon god pillar did not move at all. However, Wuming smiled. Found it. Wuming said before that he wanted Shitendaji to experience the despair brought by the sun, and closed his eyes to feel the blessing of the sun rain. Naturally, he would not play such a boring game with demon god Shitendaji. The reason why Wuming kept stabbing the demon god pillar was actually to find the holy grail inside the demon god pillar. Wuming did not think that the summoned demon god pillar would put the holy grail aside and not devour it. It could be said that without the holy grail, the demon god pillar's strength would definitely decrease. However, Wuming did not want to take out or destroy the holy grail. At this moment, a large amount of black fog suddenly enveloped Wuming. This was a magic corrosive fog that was even purer than the dark purple fog from before. Oh, I already knew that you were looking for the holy grail. You should thank me, I let you find it on purpose, Shitendaji's mocking voice could be heard. After all, Shitendaji was not an idiot. He guessed what Wuming was thinking, so he set up this trap to make Wuming fall into it. Of course I knew that this was a trap. After all, if it was you, it would be impossible for me to find the holy grail, so I took the initiative to jump into this trap. Wuming's voice came from the black fog, and it was a rather spirited voice. It did not sound like it was being corroded at all. After all, only this way can I release my authority. Chapter 5:18. Although Wuming had cheated, he did not have any trump cards like the Savior Sword or the 12 clones because of Celander's spiritual base. Wuming had only created an ordinary spiritual base in the root of Genesis and sent it to the singularity. Celander's identity was created by Maeve using the Holy Grail, so Wuming did not choose to interfere. After all, being invited in and barging in were two different concepts. Moreover, even without the Savior Sword and the 12 clones, Wuming was not weak. However, although he wasn't weak, he couldn't really injure demon god Shutting without using a noble artifact. If he wanted to cripple him, he would have to use a super energy-storing noble artifact again. However, Wuming did not plan to use a relic in the first place. As he had a concept relic to defend himself, the demon god pillar's attack could not hurt Wuming. It was a sad story. Therefore, Shitenji could only use the Holy Grail to lure Wuming out from behind the tortoise shell. Wuming also needed to come into contact with the Holy Grail, so Shitenji's actions helped Wuming. Previously, Wuming had received the sun rain from Tamamonome and received the sun god's blessing passively. After Wu Ming found out that the blessing was from the sun god, he wanted to use it to blow up the demon god Shitenji. How would he blow it up? Of course, he would use his authority to transform into the sun. With the sun god's blessing, Wu Ming did not need to change his class. He could directly use the Holy Grail to connect with the root of Genesis and use the sun god Shitenji. Of course, due to various factors, this move was only a one-time use. After it was used, it would be gone. However, based on the current situation, Wu Ming felt that it was worth it. If the demon god Shitenji was allowed to wreak havoc in the American continent, the entire continent would probably turn into a land of poison in a few days. This proved the saying once again. Even if he left, Shitenji would still cause trouble for Wu Ming. That was why Wu Ming decided to directly use the sun god's blessing upon seeing Shitenji turn into a demon god pillar and connect to the great origins usage of the Holy Grail. This was also why Wu Ming wasn't the slightest bit nervous even after falling into Shuding's trap. Because the sun's flames would burn everything. For the sake of victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. After Wu Ming finished chanting, the fog surrounding Wu Ming began to glow. Boom! A ball of golden flames broke out from the fog with an explosion, starting to burn on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar once again let out an incomprehensible sound of pain. General, demon god Wine Tun. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames instantly covered the entire demon god pillar. A strange scene appeared in Ji Road City. The giant pillar burning with golden flames kept twisting, as if trying to get rid of these deadly flames, but it couldn't get rid of them. A deep sense of powerlessness came from this flame pillar. Amaterasu. On the hillside outside Ji Road City, Tamamonoma looked at this scene and said softly. Ha! Caster, what did you say? Gudatsi, who was standing beside Tamamonome, asked doubtfully. Nothing, Master Sama. Tamamonome smiled and covered it up. Gudatsi didn't ask again, but focused on the giant flame pillar. Just now, the burning of the demon god pillar made Gudatsi shout. She was very excited, and now she calmed down. Nightingale, who was teleported by Wu Ming to Gudatsi's side, saw that the virus was about to be finished and relaxed a lot. Amaterasu. Karna said faintly. He heard Tamamonome's words. Matthew and Karna, two people, one on the left and one on the right, stood beside Gudatsi and Tamamonome. The former was guarding his senior, and the latter. It seemed that because of the sun attribute, Karna had a good impression of Tamamonome. At least, he could talk to her and wouldn't ignore her. Of course, Tamamonoma was also very interested in this same kind. As long as it was related to the sun, it was a good thing. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames slowly disappeared, and the huge demon god pillar disappeared along with it. There was no doubt that the demon god pillar disappeared. With Wu Ming's power, the sun incarnation disappeared, just like Lev in the Winterwood City. It's just that the demon god pillar, Florence, died, and there was still Lev left, but demon god Wine Tun died, there was nothing left. No, it should be the only thing left. Wu Ming looked at the original position of the demon god pillar, and thought with a strange expression. At this moment, a girl who was dressed like a Japanese princess was lying on the demon god pillar's position. Her eyes were spinning in a spiral shape. There was no doubt that this girl was unconscious, and it wasn't light. Wu Ming could faintly hear the unconscious girl mumbling something subconsciously. No, no more torture. No more torture. Wu Ming smiled, not knowing what to do. Looking at this princess girl who was no longer being tortured, she was probably talking about Tamamonome's punishment princess. It seemed that Tamamonome had been brought into the demon god pillar when it appeared. Otherwise, Wu Ming didn't think that Tamamonome would have been able to survive until now in the demon god pillar's attack range. I think I understand why Tamamonome said that Tamamonome wouldn't be the one who summoned the demon god pillar. Looking at Tamamonome's appearance, she had been unconscious for a long time. She had probably fainted after blocking Wu Ming's treasured artifact. Shitenji placing the Holy Grail in front of the unconscious Tamamonome made sense. Shaking his head, Wu Ming stopped paying attention to Tamamonome and looked at his hand. Wu Ming held the golden Holy Grail with one hand. Sensing the magic on it, Wu Ming smiled. He had finally recovered a Holy Grail. Not long after, Gudatsi's group arrived. As if it was a coincidence, when Gudatsi's group arrived, Tamamino turned into magic and left. After blocking Wu Ming's treasured artifact, being sucked into the demon god pillar, and being injured by Wu Ming's sun incarnation, it was already a miracle that she was able to last until Godatsi's group arrived and didn't leave with the demon god pillar. Placing the Holy Grail in his golden ripples, Wu Ming looked at Godatsi and sighed. Finally, the first Holy Grail has been collected. Why do I feel so tired for some reason? Wu Ming thought. Chapter 519. Wu Ming did not choose to let Chaldea retrieve the Holy Grail. Not to mention that Chaldea had not been contacted yet. Moreover, even if Wu Ming was contacted, he would not easily hand over the Holy Grail that he had just obtained to Chaldea's group. It was not that Wu Ming was greedy, but because Wu Ming was worried that the Holy Grail newly created by the Magic King would have some kind of trap. Wu Ming did not think that the Magic King's game would be so simple with only a few forces. However, it seemed that for the current Godatsi and others, the 5 forces were indeed difficult. However, to Wu Ming, the current chaotic battle between the 5 forces did not pose much of a threat. Although he did not know why the Magic King did not appear in person, even so, he could not do anything to Wu Ming. After all, it was not his main body. However, the Magic King who did not appear gave Wu Ming a feeling that there was something more important that he could not come. However, when they were in the underground of London, the Magic King said to Godatsi and others that as long as they did not open all 7 singularities, they would not be a threat to him at all. Just like how ordinary people would not care whether ants could hurt them, whether it was 1 ant or 7 ants, it was all the same. According to the Magic King, only when all 7 singularities were saved, would he take the initiative to kill Godatsi and others. During this time, Wu Ming did not think that the Magic King would sit in front of the TV and eat popcorn while watching Godatsi and others take risks. Then there was no doubt that the Magic King also had something to do. However, because of Wu Ming's intervention, Wu Ming was not sure whether the Magic King really did not eat popcorn and sit in front of the TV to watch what happened at this singularity. In any case, these new Holy Grails did not make Wu Ming feel at ease, so Wu Ming and Godatsi agreed that the Holy Grails that they obtained later would be temporarily guarded by him. Wu Ming and others walked out of Jiro City and began to move towards Riverton in the north. Jiro City did not seem to be a noble phantasm that would disappear with the servants. The Japanese forces were destroyed, and the Holy Grail was recovered by Wu Ming, but Jiro City was still there. It was still the same ruins, or even worse, razed to the ground. Let's not talk about the collision between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Boy's noble artifacts. The demon god pillar's poisonous fog and all kinds of destruction were enough to destroy Jiwei City, which had lost its defenses due to Jiji's coma and overload. Wu Ming guessed that Shitendaji, because of this, he used the Holy Grail to summon the summon monsters to leave the summon monsters, leaving only the servants. Wu Ming Doji. Godatsi, Matthew and Nightingale was to be in the middle. In the middle was to the rears. In this way, Wu Ming Doji's group did not move fast, and it could even be said that they were moving slowly. After all, they had just won a battle, and there was no need to be too anxious, so Wu Ming Doji's group of 6 walked slowly. In fact, it was also to take care of Godatsi. After all, it was rare for them to come into contact with the current crisis, so there was no need to carry Godatsi as if they were transporting goods. However, they could not be too careless, as the current lineup of 6 people could be seen. Wu Ming Doji and Karna were in front and behind, while Matthew and Nightingale were guarding Godatsi in the middle. As for Tamamo Mei, who had been following behind Wu Ming, she followed by herself. Besides, it would not affect them much, so Wu Ming acquiesced. However, it seemed that it really did affect them. Along the way, Godatsi Doji and Matthew kept looking at Wu Ming strangely, as if they were shy, as if they were praising him, as if they were gratified. In short, it was that kind of strange look that Wu Ming could not put his finger on. The more Wu Ming Doji thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, so he asked Tamamo Mei. Did you say something strange when you came here and met up with Tachika Doji and the others? Lord Celander, you're overthinking it. I merely politely introduced myself as your fiancé to you, master. Tamamo Mei smiled elegantly at Wu Ming. Ah! Wu Ming Doji finally understood why Godatsi Doji and Matthew Doji were looking at him in such a way. But I didn't say that I wanted you to be my fiancé. Forget it. Let's leave it at that for now. Seeing that it was because Tamamo Mei had fought the demon god Shutting, Wu Ming Doji decided to take a loss and leave their relationship at that for the time being. Hello, 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 hello. Speaking of which, why is Ms. Nightingale here? Wu Ming asked Gudatzi and the others behind him. Although Wu Ming's team of 6 had arranged themselves in a strict manner, Wu Ming, who was leading the way, and Karna, who was bringing up the rear, were only a few meters away from Gudatzi. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't need to raise his voice or wait until he was close enough. He could just ask directly. Oh, you're talking about this problem. Actually, it's like this. Gudatzi smiled and explained to Wu Ming. After Wu Ming heard this, he began to have some doubts about luck. That night, Wu Ming instigated Nightingale to perform an amputation operation on Achilles. Achilles was already fed up with the berserker, so he ran away. Naturally, Nightingale let go of this excellent amputation material and chased after him. The two chased each other on the land southeast of the Missouri River that was not under the influence of Rome and Greece. In this way, Nightingale chased after Achilles for a few days, but in the end, Achilles was more skillful and escaped Nightingale's pursuit. After all, he was a cavalry. Nightingale, on the other hand, could not find her target, so she began to save others along the way. For some reason, ordinary natives, soldiers of the Revolutionary Army, and so on were still wandering. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even in an era where the 5 forces were divided, humans could survive on their own. The location of Denver was not so much located in the Rocky Mountains, but more accurately, it was located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, the terrain was not high. Coincidentally, Nightingale's original location was south of Riverton and north of Denver. In this way, if she walked a little further south, Nightingale would not be far from Denver. Coincidentally, Shitendaji's poison was a pathogen for Nightingale. After feeling the poison blown away by the explosion between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Duji's noble artifacts, Nightingale came to Denver with her obsession as a berserker. Since most of the poison in Denver had been blown away, Nightingale was able to find people or things that were more poisonous at the moment. And there was no doubt that Shitendaji was that poison. Then, Nightingale came to Gudatzi's side and used her noble artifact to resist Shitendaji's poison. What happened later? Wu Ming also knew about it. With her obsession as a pathogen, Nightingale, as a berserker, found Gudatzi just like that. Wu Ming could only smile and say, "That's really as expected of a berserker." Chapter 520. Wu Ming's group didn't waste any more time. In just an hour, they arrived at Riverton. This included Karna from the American faction and Tamamo no Mae from the Japanese faction. After all, the two of them were now on the same side, and Wu Ming didn't think it was a secret that Riverton was a gathering place for followers, so he brought them there. After returning to Riverton, Wu Ming briefly told Karen and Geronimo about what they had done, including how they were accidentally found by Nightingale, Karna's support, and how Tamamo no Mae had joined Wu Ming. Of course, when he introduced Tamamo no Mae, he introduced her as a partner. Although Wu Ming did benefit from Tamamo no Mae, there was no such thing as giving one's body in return for a favor, let alone a man giving his body to a woman. Although Wu Ming was a bit thick-skinned, he wouldn't do such a shameless thing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Let's not talk about other things, but with Karna joining us, we are already a lot stronger. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, Karna nodded affirmatively. As an existence on the same level as his own disciple, Karna's strength could be said to be the best. Coupled with the memory of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Karna was relieved that this once troublesome enemy had become an ally. Sure enough, you also remember the Battle of the Holy Grail. Karna wasn't surprised to see that Karna knew him. Karna didn't think that he was special. Since he could remember the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, then the other followers in the Battle of the 14 Horsemen would certainly remember him. Hearing Karna's words, Karna smiled at Karna to show his friendliness. At this time, Wu Ming looked around and found that something was wrong. By the way, aren't there some people missing? Wu Ming looked at the followers in the room. It was obvious that there were some people missing. As for Elizabeth and the others, they ran into a little trouble. It's fine. Gudatzi coughed awkwardly. At this moment, Gudatzi was extremely embarrassed, and Matthew was beside her, looking like he was ready for battle. This made Wu Ming wonder if Gudatzi had a moral crisis just now. When Wu Ming told Geronimo and Sharon what happened, Gudatzi was attacked by Kyoheim. After that, Elizabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy threw themselves at Gudatsi and shouted, "Lady and Jeanne! Lady and Jeanne!" Kyoheim was taken away, and the scene of Gudatsi being tightly protected by Matthew appeared. As if he had thought of something, Wu Ming no longer asked about it. Then, he asked about another person. What about Rama? He won't find trouble with Greece. Other than Elizabeth and a few other servants in the team, Wu Ming found it strange that Romo, the wounded, was not here. After a few days of rest, it was reasonable to say that Rama had almost recovered. Because of this, Rama should be here in such a situation. The only reason why Rama wasn't here was that he had gone to Greece to save his wife. That's right. Although Rama belongs to the ranks of the lone followers, the king is proud and arrogant. From the beginning, he had been searching for Sido alone and did not accept our help. If it weren't for your serious injuries, we wouldn't have met again, Karen explained. And through this lesson the king has also thought it through. He is no longer alone and has decided to join us, Geronimo added. And then he went alone again? Wu Ming wondered. Wasn't it obvious? Although he decided to go with everyone, in the end, he still went to Greece alone. However, Sharon shook his head. This time he was not alone. Achilles went with him. In other words, after Achilles got rid of Nightingale, he returned to Riverton. Then, under Rama's strong desire, he listened to his teacher and accompanied Rama to Greece. Spartacus also went with them. Geronimo added and smiled. Wu Ming instantly understood Geronimo's smile and felt a little embarrassed. If Geronimo hadn't mentioned it, Wu Ming would have forgotten about him. Back then, he had used the pseudo-heavenly lock to tie Spartacus up and threw him into the woods. It seemed that Spartacus was finally found by Sharon and the others. As for Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock, it was estimated that its magic power had been exhausted and broken. After all, it had been used for a long time. Without Wu Ming's magic power to replenish it, it was normal for it to break. Anyway, Wu Ming did not feel bad about it. After all, he still had a few pseudo-heavenly locks in his spatial relics. Let's not talk about Spartacus for now. If Achilles went with them, I'm relieved. Wu Ming was relieved. He did not want Rama to be killed again. Although Achilles was easily tied up by Wu Ming's trick, as a demigod hero, Achilles was not to be underestimated. Not only did he have an almost invincible defense like Karna, but he also had many relics. For example, Achilles' shield alone was enough to block the most powerful relics of Karna and Wu Ming, which were comparable to natural disasters. Of course, although it would break after blocking for a while, it was enough for a battle that could end in a few seconds. Since Rama and the others have gone to Greece, let's work on both sides. Whether it was Sharon, Geronimo, Nightingale, or Karna and Tamamanome, they all understood what Wu Ming meant. Are we going to have a final battle? Gudatsi also understood what Wu Ming meant. She was shocked. That's right. Wu Ming decided to end the mutation of the singularity as soon as possible. With the Celtic forces, the American forces, and the lone follower forces joining forces, and the Japanese forces withdrawing, Wu Ming felt that now was the best time to destroy both Greece and Rome. Wu Ming had always felt that the trap set by the Magician King at the singularity was not that simple. He felt that Shitendaji was not the only one who knew Wu Ming's identity and was targeting Wu Ming. The longer this dragged on, the more Wu Ming felt that something was going to happen. Sharon, Geronimo, what do you think? Wu Ming asked the two of them who were acting as the wise ones. I think we should slow down a little. After all, Rama and the others just left yesterday. They should be in Greece now, Geronimo said calmly. However, Sharon expressed a different opinion. I agree with Salander, but I suggest we only attack one of the forces for now. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.